Now, check this out. I told you that it all connects, right? Let's do some connecting. Started by Planned Parenthood's medical director. Interesting. Started by their national medical director, Mary Calderon, in 1964. SIECUS claimed that their work was for exclusively religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational purposes. And with enough links to the communist and humanist organizations to make your head spin, SIECUS is anything but a scientific, follow the science, and educational enterprise. With board members and founders who defended incest, yes, that's right, and were obsessed with the sexuality of children, SIECUS maintained from their first years as an organization that children were sexual beings with sexual needs, and that the force of sexuality should be integrated into the total personality of a child. Yep. Exclusively citing their own board members and their own friends to bolster their new social science, SIECUS received funding from Hugh Hefner, the founder of Playboy magazine, maintained a close relationship with Alfred Kinsey and the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. They pioneered sensitivity training. They produced sex ed resources that published porn and Playboy reprints. SIECUS was, from the beginning, an institutional tool in Sexual Revolutionaries' toolkit to break down the Judeo-Christian culture and sexualize children, while they're still too young and innocent to know that they are lab rats being used by social scientists to usher in the Marxist revolution. There you go. That's the introduction to my little opening comments here. That's the summary. Okay, you can clip that if you forget everything else I say over the next 15 minutes. That's where comprehensive sexuality education comes from. Okay. Now you guys might be aware of the obscenity laws. Monica Klein might have. Monica's a good friend, but I wasn't able to make the 101. So Monica Klein might have touched on this, but have you guys ever, the moms here, drop in a comment in the audience. I'm curious for everyone on here. Have you ever, over the last 5 years, seen the porn in the classroom, or you see the school board turn off the mic when my friend John Amanchukwu, who's in my film, reads the stuff out loud, right? It's like, that's inappropriate. It's like, then why is it in the fifth grader's school library, you perverts, right? Have y'all ever looked at that and gone, I don't understand. Why don't they just send the sheriff down to arrest the school board members or the people at the school having the porn books in the library? Go ahead and say yes if you've ever had that thought. Why? Isn't it porn? Why don't they just send the sheriff down? Why don't we just arrest these people? I thought it was illegal to show porn for kids. Yeah, everyone's saying yes. Okay. Do you want to know why? Here's how clever and strategic sexual perverts are. Yes, sorry, it's true. Sexual perverts are often very strategic and very clever. It's been said that lust darkens the mind. Okay, so it makes you dark, but it doesn't make you stupid. And the left has used the force of sexuality as a way to incite youngsters to a sexual frenzy to make them easier to control. So one of the things that SIECUS and their whole cabal did, which I'll explain more of the connections in just a second, is they were very successful, very strategic in lobbying before state boards of education to change the obscenity laws so that what used to be illegal to show a child, a minor, is now legal if it's done for educational purposes in the public school classroom. So some of those books in the library and some of SIECUS's own sex ed stuff that Planned Parenthood uses it. Oh, by the way, trivia time, put in the comments, who's the largest provider today in 2025 of comprehensive sexuality education, CSE? Go ahead and put it in. Who's the largest provider in America of comprehensive sexuality education? I'm super curious to see who's the based, most red-pilled mom or dad on the call today. I'll look for it if you guys pop it in. So they were very successful in changing the laws so that if I had shown that curriculum to your kids, if you had me over for dinner, Terry, it's Planned Parenthood, exactly. You could have me arrested if I showed that kind of filth to your children. But if you took the same booklet and you put it in a public school classroom, then it's no longer illegal because it's educational purposes. So that is how successful they've been. And so if my numbers are still correct, there's something like 38 states that have obscenity exemption laws. 38 states that have obscenity exemption. In other words, yeah, it is obscene and it is pornographic, but we have an exemption for porn as long as it's in a public school classroom because the context and how it's being used is for educational purposes. Okay. Well, check this out. This is so insane. Okay. Guess who footed the bill to pay to bring in the sex ed experts to lobby before state boards of education to change the obscenity laws? Penthouse magazine. Penthouse, the more hardcore version of Playboy. Penthouse footed the bill, and nearly all the speakers lobbying before state boards of education to change the obscenity laws were on the payroll of the pornography industry. Can someone please say, conflict of interest, conflict of interest? Of course you want to sexualize kids and get them hooked on porn at a young age and then package it as educational, because those are future magazine customers and porn film customers, you sick freaks. Those were the people on the payroll of the pornography industry were the ones lobbying before state boards of education in the 60s and the 70s to change the laws so that your kid could look at porn in the public school classroom. But if your neighbor showed that your kid the same booklet, they could be arrested. Okay, so that's how insane some of this stuff is. Now, what led to the founding of SECUS? Like how did this all happen? There was this interesting leading event to the launch of SECUS that was this UNESCO-sponsored symposium on health education. UNESCO, the United Nations Ethical and Societal Cultural Organization. UNESCO is still around today. And they had this symposium on health education, sex education in 1964 in Hamburg, Germany. Watch this. Months before SECUS was founded. Months before SECUS was founded in Hamburg, Germany. And it was attended by educators from all parts of the free world and Iron Curtain countries. Now, there was a journalist who attended this symposium, international symposium on sex ed. Her name was Brigitta Linner. She was the author of a book called Sex and Society in Sweden. Brigitta Linner, spelled Linner. And she reported on the 1964 United Nations conference and verified that the sex education proposal that was put forth for universal use in all these free countries was put forth by the Swedish delegates. And the Swedish program that was offered at this Hamburg, Germany's health symposium included abortion, birth control, venereal disease, and sexual deviations. Okay, like teaching kids all of these different ways to do weird sex stuff. Okay, and it was reported that the SECUS concept of sex education ended up being a carbon copy of the Swedish program as adopted by UNESCO. So it was no coincidence, apparently, that SECUS was formed only a few months after this United Nations 1964 symposium. Okay, so I say that to tell you this: much of the filth that led to the founding of SECUS, who becomes the pioneer in crafting all of the comprehensive sexuality education as you know it today, actually involved the United Nations, which shouldn't surprise you. The United Nations was pushing this kind of filth, and the World Health Organization and organizations like that, way before they became American leftist organizations. And the history behind this is pretty shocking and pretty disturbing. In fact, Mary Calderon's husband, remember, Mary Calderon is the founder of SECUS after she was Planned Parenthood's medical director. Her husband, Frank Calderon, served as the chief administrator for the World Health Organization for a man named G. Brock Chisholm. And why is this interesting? Because G. Brock Chisholm, who was Mary Calderon's husband's boss. I know this is a lot of crazy history, but he, as the head of the World Health Organization, G. Brock Chisholm participated in laying the foundation for sex education with Julian Huxley, who is the brother of Aldous Huxley, who wrote Brave New World. And Julian Huxley was one of the big American leftist humanists who was involved in a lot of the weird sex ed stuff. And they laid the foundation for sex education and sensitivity training as early as the late 40s by way of 3 lectures delivered in Washington, D.C., where G. Brock Chisholm appeared upon the invitation by former communist Alger Hiss. And Chisholm gives these lectures in D.C. to lay the foundation for the comprehensive sex ed that has us all pissed off today. And there he advocated starting sex ed in the 4th grade. And in this lecture in Washington, D.C., this is kind of one of those smoking guns, you know, like the thing that gives it all away. Like, you know, when the left says the quiet part out loud and you're like, oh, I know that's what you really wanted, right? So let me say this again. So G. Brock Chisholm, who was the boss of Mary Calderon's husband, Frank Calderon, Chisholm, who led the World Health Organization, spoke in D.C. like almost 2 decades, maybe 17, 18 years before SECUS is founded. And he said that we have to eliminate the way of the elders. And he insisted on eradicating the concept of right and wrong, end quote. Eradicating the concept of right and wrong. In the context of talking about weird sex ed material for 4th graders, what are we seeing here, guys? That when you sexualize youngsters and you incite them to a sexual frenzy, you encourage them to indulge any and all sexual appetites at a young, innocent stage where they shouldn't even be thinking about such things, much less acting upon them, they become much easier to control, right? And they become functional moral relativists, right? When you tell a young kid, hey, anal sex, threesomes, orgies, try it all. You know, like Monica Klein says, right? When Planned Parenthood staffer tapped her on the knee and said, oh, honey, we're not here to tell them not to have sex. We're here to teach them how to do it safely, right? Okay, whatever, right? That if that becomes the goal, it's a very effective way to eradicate concepts like right and wrong in the minds of youngsters and make them pliable little pawns in the future globalist long walk through the institution. So sex has always been this powerful tool of controlling the masses. And when you can do that to young people, it becomes extremely damaging, but very effective if you're a kooky, weirdo sex pervert who likes to control the next generation. Okay, so we see all of this in the United Nations, in the World Health Organization, and in the lead up to the founding of SECUS. Okay, all this, I know this is like, go grab your barf, you know, bag. Everyone wants to throw up now, but it's important that you understand this stuff. Now, guess who one of the board members was? The first board member of SECUS when it was founded by Mary Calderon, again, Planned Parenthood's medical director in 1964. His name was Wardell Pomeroy. Wardell Pomeroy would later go on to become the director of the Kinsey Institute. Shocker, not shocker, actually. I'm not surprised at all. Wardell Pomeroy was also a board member of Penthouse magazine. And he was one of Alfred Kinsey's many, many gay lovers. That's right. Alfred Kinsey had many gay lovers. Okay. And a lot of that he filmed in porn films at the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University and in his home with his wife. Okay. Like Kinsey was an absolute psychopath. Okay. Wardell Pomeroy was the author of a 1977 article appearing in Penthouse titled A New Look at Incest. A New Look at Incest. And in this article, here's what Wardell Pomeroy, let me say this again, guys. The founding board member of SECUS, who's the pioneer of all comprehensive sex ed. You ready for this quote from Wardell Pomeroy's 1977 article? Here it goes. Quote, incest can be a satisfying, non-threatening, and even an enriching emotional experience, end quote. He became such a weirdo for his obsession with incest that Time magazine ran a piece on him in 1980 called Attacking the Last Taboo. Well, what's the last taboo? Incest. Like Wardell Pomeroy was openly part of the pro-incest lobby, okay? One of the other board members of SECUS was Lester Kirkendall, Lester Kirkendall was a founding member of SIECUS, a director of the American Humanist Organization. He's a signer of the Humanist Manifesto, which dedicated to the eradicating God from the universe. He was a board member of Planned Parenthood in Oregon. He was a donor of the Temple of Understanding, which was this weird New Age pagan weird thing at the United Nations. He was a contributing author to the Sexuality magazine. And he wrote a book with Isidore Rubin, who was another member of SIECUS, called Sex in the Adolescent Years. So a total psych weirdo, okay? Now, Ira Reese, here's another board member and founding member of SIECUS. Ira Reese is someone that's important for you to know about, so you start seeing how psychopathic and pedophilic these people were. So Ira Reese, who was a board member of SIECUS from 66 to 69, wrote a book called An End to Shame, Shaping Our Next Sexual Revolution. And he said, to build sexual pluralism, we must root out the narrow thinking about sex that exists in our basic institutions like family, political, economic, religious, and educational. He said, we need to change our whole basic social institutional structure. He said, we don't need a majority of the nation in order to make significant change in our society. We need only a small percentage of the population who are dedicated to promoting all of our sexual rights. So it's an important admission to remind you guys today that massive cultural change does not happen with 51%. It always happens with a minority of radically devoted individuals who will lay it all on the line. The left has done that for chaos and damage, and you guys are here to do that for righteousness, common sense, and order, and the preservation of children in the next generations. Okay, so what else about SIECUS here? Mary Calderon, the founder, wrote a piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer magazine in 1966. And here's where she basically says why she created SIECUS. So if you want to hear it from the founder's mouth as to why you're fighting comprehensive sex ed today, here it is from the pioneer's horse's mouth, okay? She said, we should teach our children that this force of sexuality must be integrated into the total personality of the individual, and that people must learn to engage it and use it creatively in relationships with one another as men and women. She said, the best program I know for doing this is the one I helped formulate at SIECUS. So this was never about like, oh, let's just make sure the kids know about how babies are created. From the very beginning, it was about impelling this force of sexuality into the whole minds of children, okay? And they were very open about this. And so they began to develop study guides to be used by teachers, okay, in the schools. In fact, they had a half-page SIECUS ad that appeared in the Humanist magazine in 1965, announcing that it was their intention to become involved in teacher preparation. Okay, like that they were there to shape the teachers who would shape the minds of the youngsters. Their SIECUS study guide number 3 was written by Warren Johnson, a SIECUS director who promoted homosexuality, masturbation, and a hatred of Christianity. SIECUS study guide number 10 was written by Isidore Rubin, who was a communist and SIECUS board member. And he said that the right of the individual is to engage in any form of sex behavior. Notice, by the way, how the sexual revolutionaries and the people who founded SIECUS, they never use the word child or person. They use the word individual because they don't believe in age of consent. They talk about children as individuals instead of as minors or children because they think that everyone should have sex regardless of the age. Okay, and you start to see the pedophilic like assumptions that a lot of these people have. Okay. Isidore Rubin in SIECUS study guide number 10 quotes another SIECUS recommended author, because SIECUS would have these recommended authors and books for teachers to use and kids to use. And his name was Judson Landis. And I think Judson Landis, again, a SIECUS recommended author by Mary Calderon, summarized the goal of SIECUS pretty well. Check this out, okay? He said, when acts are no longer forbidden to all, when the individual is authorized to decide whether or not violation will be advantageous, the moral code vanishes. The moral code vanishes. Oh, so when everything is on the table sexually and nothing is off the table sexually, and you encourage children to indulge those sexual appetites and addictions at a young age, concepts like right and wrong and the moral code just disappears. Remember back to G. Brock Chisholm, who was the boss of Mary Calderon's husband at DC in the 40s, laying the framework for comprehensive sex ed with Julian Huxley, saying we need to eradicate concepts like right and wrong. Okay, so anyways, we'll land the plane here because I'm short on time. But basically, you need to understand that all of the SICA study guides recommended pornography drawings, pornography magazines. All of their funders were humanists, were on the board of the American Humanist Association, or were part of the United Nations, or worked for Alfred Kinsey, or were having sex with Alfred Kinsey, or worked for Playboy magazine, or were part of the abortion lobby. In fact, the SICUS itself, guess where they launched SICUS? At the Kinsey Institute. And all of the scientific sources in all of the SICUS study guides, when you follow the citations for these new claims about the science of sexuality, when you follow the citations, guess where you always end up back at? The Kinsey Institute, who interviewed pedophiles and rapists serving lifetime prison sentences to get their sexual data and put it in his 2 books to make it sound like that was the normal sexual behavior of the normal American married male and the normal American married female. But it was actually from interviewing the most sexually crazy and criminal. And that data helped shift American culture by telling the next generation that this was, in fact, the kind of behaviors that most Americans were engaging in sexually. And this is what put the sexual revolution on steroids. And this is what provided the facade of science for the filth that you're fighting in your counties, in your states, in your classrooms, and in your school boards today. We've only scratched the surface of the history behind the fight that Moms for Liberty is engaging against today.
Wow. I have to say right off, first of all, before we go any further, I just want to point to everyone. I referenced it last week on the CSE 101 to that amazing interview you did with Audrey Werner and Claire Chambers, I believe it was,
Yes.
the mom who exposed the sexual cabal, where you go into this even more in depth. Like everyone, I have to tell you, Seth does not have time to talk about it as much as he did in this. So we have that linked on our resource toolkit.
Yes.
You can find it. I'm telling you that it's a little bit scary because there's a part of me that goes, wait a second, this sounds like a conspiracy theory. Like it's all connected, but it's actually all connected.
That's
which
right.
I find absolutely insane. So thank you so much for laying the groundwork for that and helping to show to us, well, as you reference in that wonderful episode, actually you talk about framing the timbers.
Framing the timbers.
Yeah, how this is all really connected. So now we learned about the background of it and of CSE, where it really came from. Next, we're going to move over to Kelly Shenkoski, who's going to talk to us a little bit about where it's at now, where it's going, and a little bit of what we can do to fight back. So Kelly Shenkoski is a dedicated education advocate and host of the A Time to Stand podcast, where she passionately addresses education concerns, parental rights, and politics. Witnessing alarming ideologies in her children's school, she began extensive research and now leads grassroots efforts in California, training citizens and supporting parents. She's committed to protecting kids, and Kelly actively engages in national debates on critical education issues. She exposes dangerous ideologies and provides practical resources to families across the country. So without further ado, I am thrilled to bring Kelly on to talk to you about a little bit more of where CSE is today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you all again. Some of you may remember me. I was at the SEL 101 event, and it's great to be back to discuss comprehensive sexuality education. When this event tonight began, Missy made a really good point, and she said that in the phrase comprehensive sexuality education, that the word sexuality had a significance. And she's absolutely right. One of the things I wanted to bring up was why that word. I mean, even though sometimes we'll see comprehensive sex education, that original word is significant. In one of the founding documents, International Planned Parenthood Federation and many other organizations have documents on comprehensive sexuality education. But there's one that's called, by the International Planned Parenthood Federation, Putting Sexuality Back into Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And in that document, there is a section about that word, sexuality. And it says this: sexuality as a concept is multifaceted. This can give rise to confusion about how the word sexuality is being used. So when you hear that a school wants to mandate comprehensive sexuality education, or that comprehensive sexuality education is going to be encouraged to be taught as young as kindergarten or even earlier, what does that phrase mean? So in this document, they actually reference a definition that was established by the World Health Organization, and it states this: the WHO defines sexuality as, quote, a central aspect of being human throughout life, which encompasses sex, gender identities and roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, and reproduction. And that's an end quote. So when you hear that phrase, comprehensive sexuality education, that middle terminology and the definition of terms established by these proponents and activists for this model, for this plan, is really significant to understand what their definition is. We're living in a time when lots of words are being redefined. And even within this particular topic, it's important to understand the marketing, the model in which they're seeking to get optimal buy-in and market this to the public. So depending on where you live, you might be hearing of comprehensive health curriculum, or you might be hearing comprehensive sex education or comprehensive sexuality education, or you might just be hearing family life curriculum. So these are all some of the terms that they use to advance the ideas of comprehensive sexuality education curricula. But that word is very important. And within the IPPF, again, that's the International Planned Parenthood Federation framework for comprehensive sexuality education, there is within that document an example of and an illustration of what their main components of CSE teaching is. And that includes seven main points. One, gender. And so this would incorporate gender ideology. Two, sexual and reproductive health and HIV. So when you hear sexual and reproductive health, SRH, or sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR, this is going to encompass not just abortion, abortion pill, those typical ideas that are underneath that umbrella of SRH, sexual and reproductive health, as they call it. But this would also include the concerning gender ideology and the medicalization of this. We're talking about concerning medications and drugs that sterilize young people, puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries. So this is encompassed into that. And it's really important to be aware of, because in curricula that's already out there today in comprehensive sexuality education, the ideas of not just gender ideology, this idea that there's an expansion of, we're not just male and female, but this idea using whether it's a gender unicorn or a genderbread person, as they use, this idea that it's in the mind and that it's limitless. And again, as Seth discussed, these ideas are rooted in the studies of Kinsey, sexology, queer theory, and so on and so forth. Another couple of points. Point number 3 for comprehensive sexuality education is sexual rights and sexual citizenship. So these are probably new ideas to you. When I started reading through this document in more recent years, I started wondering if these are theories. And there's actually several theories in which comprehensive sexuality education has been influenced by. And so queer theory is one of them. Sexual citizenship was a document I remember looking at. It was written in 1994 by a man named David T. Evans. And he himself was a student of queer theory. And so there's already the concepts of this idea that your sexual citizenship is separate from other aspects of citizenship. And when you hear the way in which they're framing, when they say that phrase, sexual rights, that all these things are a human right, you have a right to fill in the blank, that is a marketing slogan. And it's important for us to be aware of the marketing that they're using to try and get that optimal buy-in from the public. Even when they initially, here in my state of California, this is the interesting thing. I remember friends of mine when we were addressing the California Healthy Youth Act here in California. Many friends of mine had already been aware of CSE because they were already going to the UN. And a friend of mine, April, who I interviewed, she shared with me about how CSE typically is introduced by whether it's schools that are voluntarily accepting and choosing to partake in this, but it's also oftentimes forced, because you don't see people out in the streets that are demanding and marching for CSE, for this new explicit graphic form of sex education. You don't see this, that we're not seeing a demand all of a sudden. Oftentimes the proponents, what they do is they find some people who will create a story for them, and they'll say, oh, we're going to tell this through a story. And that is a way to use emotional appeal in marketing to try and get optimal buy-in from the audience without a full comprehensive picture of the curricula and content that's being promoted, where it derives from, etc. So when you're thinking about looking into CSE, I want you, when you're reviewing a curriculum, particularly parents, I want you to look at curricula as if you are now working for a marketing team for one of the biggest companies in the United States, and you're particularly getting ready to analyze marketing pitches for a Super Bowl ad. I want you to start studying curricula in this same way, because, for example, we talked about different organizations that have influenced CSE, SECUS, that one, absolutely. Another one being Advocates for Youth. And Advocates for Youth was not originally under that name. It started in 1980 as the Center for Population Options. And now Advocates for Youth is partnered. They helped work on the National Sexuality Education Standards, which is broadly used. They've worked with UNESCO. I know UNESCO was mentioned. The United Nations and the International Planned Parenthood Federation and many other groups are highly involved in the implementation of and promotion for this explicit graphic sexuality education. And in that, Advocates for Youth also is managing amaze.org. And amaze.org creates these marketing cartoon videos that they say is for ages 10 and up. But these videos have been shown to students as young as definitely first grade in school. There is a video that Amaze puts out, and I often encourage parents when they're trying to understand CSE to particularly watch the Amaze video on virginity. And the reason being is this: you're going to be able to witness the multifaceted layers of their marketing model to minors. Because when you're studying marketing, you're studying color, you're studying tone, you're studying the narrator's voice, the screenplay type text that's being used, and how that coordinates with the cartoon characters or whoever's on the screen. You're also paying attention to the other additional layers. What's in the background? pause frame, watch that video and pause frame. So when you watch the virginity video specifically by Amaze, there's a couple things that you're able to pick up. The character that is represented as the character that's waiting, abstaining from sex until they're married, is portrayed as someone with acne, somebody who's got glasses, and overall, they're portrayed in a different light as the characters that are sexually active. This student is also portrayed as religious in that video. And then while the narrator is talking about a whole aspect of topics in that particular amaze.org video, the narrator says oral sex while this female character takes a bite of a hot dog. So that is designed. That is something that is all marketing. And if you watch multiple videos of theirs, you can start to pick up and see, oh my, I can really see and recognize what's going on here. The introduction of messaging to minors about sex, sexuality, gender, etc. It is to eradicate the older knowledge and to put in a new knowledge. And this is exactly what the proponents of CSE even talk about. I remember watching a video where one of the proponents was discussing the ways in which they needed to reach kids young before certain ideas became predominant. So, for example, one of these speakers said that they needed to reach kids in the early elementary grades before heteronormative values and assumptions became more deeply ingrained and less mutable. So what they're saying is that they're working towards an idea that they're wanting to reach kids little because they're trying to actually change kids. And this is sex ed for social change, just like SECUS's slogan is. Advocates for Youth, as we were just talking about, they are very involved, not just in managing Amaze and being part of groups like the Future of Sex Education, but it was actually out of Advocates for Youth that school-based health centers, many of you who are listening have heard me talk about and expose the WISC model of community schools, which will be a topic in the future, hopefully. But it was out of Advocates for Youth that a lot of the work on developing and advancing school-based health centers got started. So understanding that you have the training, they're trying to get to the kids young, and then they're working towards connecting kids to those health providers. I often call this program, whether it's comprehensive sexuality education or the WISC model of community schools and these school-based health centers, I often refer to them as either a school to sterilization pipeline or a school to Planned Parenthood pipeline, because it is oftentimes seen that it is through these teachings that the kids are then referred to the clinics. And one of the things I wanted to also tell a lot of the parents that are listening is when you're looking for curriculum, when you're trying to go through your school board and understand what you need to see, the very first time I met with the curriculum director in my children's school district, I was handed information on the Dairy Council, and I said, you already know, I'm not here to talk about the Dairy Council, but thank you. And I said, I'm looking to see what you're doing to comply with the California Healthy Youth Act. And I was provided a few pages of bullet points that the guest speakers were going to come in and talk about. I was not provided links to videos. I was not provided any slides. I was not provided an actual curricula, despite me being told I was handed a curricula. And it's really important to make sure that you are fully equipped and aware to understand and recognize what you ought to be able to see. I find it really interesting. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of the proponents of CSE will try and use stories of people on one side or another to try and demonstrate their frame, which is rooted oftentimes in critical frames, but their framing of CSE, their narrative or counter narrative that they're trying to get the public to buy into. And in doing this, by creating stories, it's very interesting and telling, because what you find is that if we really needed to learn all about CSE, and if these proponents were really being honest, they would make everything open source. It wouldn't be so difficult to even access curricula. It would all be open source. And it's interesting because their marketing is that this is for the health of young people, that we need to make sure that all young people are healthy and safe. But in reality, if it was really about the young people being healthy and safe, why is it so hard to access the curricula? Why is it not open source? And we wouldn't need people to be telling these stories, because we would be able to just see the evidence before our eyes. It would be easily accessible, and we'd be able to make our own decisions based on the information we see. So it is oftentimes important to understand that whether you're at a school board meeting or you're out there talking to members of the community, there's a large amount of marketing on this, because it is tied to multiple agendas that also do impact and relate to money. And it was interesting, Seth talked earlier about SECUS and the porn industry. And it's really interesting because SECUS did a series of webinars. You can find them on YouTube. I did a Twitter thread a while back on SECUS, and this idea that the sex toy industry is in any way, shape, or form connected with CSE, SECUS actually partnered with an organization called B-Vibe, and they're a sex toy company, and they announced it at the beginning of all of their webinar series, and then they put out a press release on it, and they talk about partnering with SECUS for their mission. But it's really important for us to understand this isn't just history and past, this is present, this is future. On the global organizations that are very involved in the advancement of comprehensive sexuality education, there's organizations like International Planned Parenthood Federation, the World Health Organization, UNESCO, which is tied to the United Nations and the United Nations themselves. But there's also an organization called the Pleasure Project. They work oftentimes closely with the WHO. And that fourth component of the 7 aspects of CSE, it is pleasure. And the ways in which that organization even works with, they've even made their own porn film. So it is important for us to be aware of the background and the current organizations involved, so that we can understand who's creating this, who's molding and shaping the minds of young people in one of the most important aspects of something that they're going to learn about that will impact future relationships and their ideas about themselves. I remember listening to an interview with courageous mom, Erin Friday, and she talked about in her own story how her own child was impacted because of a guest speaker that came in during comprehensive sexuality education and started promoting these wide ranges of gender ideology. So going back to, as a parent, what's happening right now, the website for SECUS actually has an entire section on their website with state profiles, where you can look at your state and see how SECUS grades your state and what requirements are coming in. I mentioned earlier my friend April. She said again that it was interesting that most of the time CSE comes into a region, it's by force, which is usually a required law, like in California, the California Healthy Youth Act. Every school in the state of California was told that they had to start by 2018 implementing CSE once in middle school and once in high school, but every district had the freedom to add additional grades as they decided as a school board. And then what happened is parents throughout the state of California here were fighting to try and just get access to the curriculum, which is still incredibly difficult. Parents trying to access even the digital versions of CSE are running into difficulty because the school district is giving them a link, and that link is requiring them to put in all of this personal information, which I don't recommend you do. I think that's a tremendous issue in CSE today, is that we're going to start seeing digital forms of this curricula introduced to young people. And if parents want access to it, parents are being told that they have to provide all of this personal information about their name, their email, their child's full name, where their child goes to school, their child's teacher, all to a third-party organization. One of the things that I'm hopeful of, that I'm thankful that parents are doing, is they're starting to understand their rights in this and the importance of transparency, even when curricula is challenging to access. And parents are also taking things to court. And one of the areas in California and other regions that is really starting to be challenged. In California, parents were told that we lost the right to opt our children out of sexual orientation and gender identity and expression teaching. So SOGIE, SOGIE. And parents are taking this issue to court. And it looks like parents are already starting to see success. So it's important for us to be willing to talk with people about this and also know how to find this. So if you're looking in your school board agenda, this is what I want you to pay attention to. If you have a searchable school board agenda and you're trying to find something, you might look for specific curricula names, or you might just search sex education, health, family life. These are some words that may allow you to then see a contract agreement or a memorandum of understanding. And if you're going to speak to somebody at the school, I usually recommend that you speak to your director of curriculum. And you should find out, based on the laws in your state, especially, but also in your given district, what curricula or supplemental curricula is being used to teach health and sex education or comprehensive sexuality education. I would ask specifically to see any slides, teacher training slides, student slides, but ask to view them in presentation mode, because here in California, we found that was significantly different. Some schools were just putting a binder in their front office, and the binder just showed images. And so because I had researched this, I knew that one of the printed pages in this binder was an amaze.org video, but there was no link to the video. There was no title to the video. There was next to no information. And then you don't obviously know, if you're a parent, that that's a video. And so parents should be able to see all of the slides in presentation mode. It's important to understand what books and literature are being used and referred to. There was a young woman named Kaya that I interviewed, and her school district actually based their entire curriculum off of a book that is explicit and graphic called SEX, The All You Need to Know Guide to Get You Through Your Teens and 20s by Heather Karina. Heather Karina, speaking of, is an article that she had written was exposed on Twitter that has been archived. It was taken off of her website. She runs a website called Scarletine, and it's important for you parents to understand that Scarletine is often used to create CSE curricula, but it's often also a website that students are referred to. So Karina, as exposed by Paul Rossi on Twitter, the article attributed to Karina says, as they're talking about minors and sex. It says rape is sex without consent. Though child molestation is rape, it does not follow that all sex with a minor is rape. Wow. That's what the article says. And it continues to say, unless we are stating that our young men and women are mentally disabled and thus unable to give consent, thus making all sexual acts performed by a minor into rape by definition, whether with adults or peers. Then it says this by this author whose content informs and is recommended through CSE curricula. It says this: we cannot say that a youth who says yes emphatically to any sexual relationship has not given consent if we have furnished them with the information they require to do so. So this is a very serious concern. This article, again, Paul Rossi exposed this. It was archived and called The Rage of Consent. And consent is a very interesting topic within CSE because many people have heard good things about teaching consent, but they're not aware of how consent is taught in CSE. So one of the ways that consent may be taught is students in a group of their class surrounded by their peers may have a guest speaker, for example, come into the classroom. The guest speaker is somebody that they've never met, and they will be given a sexual script to act out in front of their peers. And so they might be told that I'm at a party or I'm feeling this right now. I want to do this to you. And that is supposed to be acted out. What this does is this one reduces teenagers' natural boundaries, their natural healthy boundaries. And the focus on teaching a minor who cannot legally consent to sex on how to consent is a very serious concern, blurring these boundaries. Not only that, but it is diminishing teaching young people to avoid sexual activity. It's also diminishing the topic of actually empowering kids how to say no. And the reason I like to bring this up is because so often young people already know from their parents, from their schools, from their sports teams, they have been taught, it is ingrained into them to be obedient and to say yes. And oftentimes, if you're a young teenager or a preteen or an elementary schooler, it is so important for those kids to be able to be trained and taught that there is a good time to scream, there is a good time to say no, and there is a good time to get away. And what I'm concerned with this topic of consent is that while it's being framed saying that it's a mechanism to reduce sexual assault, I actually see it as somebody who was sexually assaulted when I was in 8th grade as a huge concern, because if I had only been taught how to say yes, it would have been much harder to stand up and to fight back. And so that I think is very important. Parents oftentimes are teaching kids to say yes, but there's so many times to teach our kids to say no. With regards to going back to really quick before I wrap this up, curricula to be looking out for, what games are being played in the class, you should be able to hear that from the school district. What tools are going to be used, because they're actually advertising to health educators, PE teachers, in educational magazines, little, penis models that actually squirt fluid and then can be examined under a UV light. So understand what tools are being used by the class, what games are going to be played, what apps and websites and organizations are the students referred to. Oftentimes today in CSE, students are being referred to school-based health clinics. They're being encouraged to access healthcare without their parents or guardians present. They're being taught to care more about a trusted adult, which even that language of safe or trusted adult immediately gives another message. The other message is that the people I can't go to are unsafe. They're not trustworthy. And oftentimes parents are not framed as the trusted adult in CSE curricula. It is very minimized to go and talk with your parent. Other things that schools are doing with CSE is they're starting to encourage sex ed clubs that are led by college students. They're advertising their health services. They're also referring to legal services. Some curricula already today refers young people to legal services so they can emancipate themselves from their parents in order to access puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, etc. And ultimately what CSE also, it's not just what they do teach, it's what they omit. We often talk about what they do teach. Very little is actually taught about keeping yourself safe and healthy and protected. But I have yet to see a CSE curricula that really talks about healthy, good relationships and what love really is. Something that can last a lifetime. What does that look like? There is so much missing from CSE because this is a whole goal of changing a young child's, an impressionable child's worldview on a variety of ways using sex, sexuality, gender, etc. So it's manipulating a child who's impressionable, like putty in their hands, like a puppet, to then in turn advance their goals, advance their agenda. And children and teens deserve the gift of a childhood. Too often today, adults are treated like children and children are treated like adults, in my opinion, in society. And the relationships that people want to have are just glossed over. They're minimized. A healthy family is one of the strongest things that we can develop. There's all different kinds of families out there, but a family where the parent and their children, their sons, their daughters, their teenagers are having a good communication, a good relationship is so important. Having meals around the table, being able to teach your children topics that are not age appropriate in the definition of CSE, which is a very loosely defined term that they use, but actually truly age appropriate, and being able to ingrain into your children and instill values and encourage them to ask questions of you, the parent, to be able to tell you things. And one more thing that I think is really important while we're talking about CSE and all of these topics is to be ensuring that your child knows that if they're uncomfortable with something being taught at school or something a teacher has told them, to empower your child to say, this doesn't make me feel comfortable, I'm going to the front office. Or this goes against my own personal beliefs and values, and I'm going to the front office. I'm not going to sit here through this lesson. That's not easy to do, but it is something worth letting your child know that they have that permission from you to do so. And also, if an adult at school is doing something that is wrong, or asking them to go to a school-based health center, or inviting them to a particular club, that child could say, you know what, I heard that invitation and I think I'm going to call my mom or my dad and ask them about it and see what they think, because you just invited me to this and I'm going to run this by my parents. And keeping that open window of communication is good, because there is definitely an effort in CSE to undermine the family, to use impressionable kids, to install a new worldview, but also ultimately we're watching such a sad state of things where sterilization and mutilation of minors is occurring in this country. And that is being promoted through CSE. And so we as parents can be informed, we can inform others with love and respect and speaking the truth in love. And then we can also stand up to this and let our legislators know that we don't want this, that we didn't ask for it, that it's not valuable. And we don't need these individuals and these organizations teaching our kids. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And especially, I really appreciate the action items that you put forward and the opportunity or the hopeful message there. Because honestly, some of this is so, frankly, it's kind of depressing to think that all this is happening. The idea that the families being attacked, that we have all of this that we're fighting against. It's so helpful to have a positivity, a positive message come out of this as well. So I appreciate that. Okay, I am very much looking forward to moving on to our Q&A now. So bringing all of our guests on screen, I have a couple of things that I want to touch on first. So I was, first of all, I just was have to comment that I was shocked to hear that the parents in California have lost the ability to opt out of education, that they don't they are not comfortable with. That floored me. Um, one of our when I was previously talking with our team, one of the things that we had asked was, with the state of CSE or sex ed in general, where we're going. At Moms for Liberty, we often talk about opt outs and being very aware of that. And is that the only option left now? What do you do in that situation where you can't opt out? What's the option there?
If in that case, and that this is one of the things I said, is that parents are seeing success with lawsuits. I definitely recommend sunlight through journalism and basically legal counsel to see if they have an opportunity to take this to court, because that is one of the ways that we challenge and fight back what's wrongly being implemented through legislation and departments of education. So absolutely, I think it's important for us to look into the options of contacting and seeing what our legal parameters are in those cases.
It's a lot. But it's honestly, it's important. We have to be willing to step up and take it to the courts. I think that's really something that we definitely have to, unfortunately, we have to keep that as an option. Okay, we have a lot of questions that are submitted in our Q&A, so I'm going to ask our moderator bring up our first question. What can we look at first? Okay, why are public schools still promoting curricula influenced by Alfred Kinsey's ideas, especially when they emphasize sexual exploitation in children?
So I think it's really important for everyone to understand that the left is usually, or more often than not, exactly what they call their political opponents, exactly what they criticize the other side. You guys are racists. It turns out the left is super racist. They don't think black people are smart enough to go figure out how to get their ID taken for their license. You see all these reporting stories, right? It's like they're like, if you have voter ID laws, liberals are they're on street people doing interviews. They're like, black people won't be able to vote. It's like, wow, you sound get behind me, KKK. They're always almost what they criticize of you beings when they're saying oh, conservatives, because I hear all the stuff about Catholics and the priests having sex with the kids, and there's always some new sexual scandal on the right. They're like, it's the right that has a sex problem. It's like, dude, you guys are pushing for laws to chop off children's genitals, and you're saying we shouldn't call pedophiles, we should call them minor attracted persons. Okay, anyway, I could ramble and ramble and ramble, but that question is such a good-hearted question, right? Because the person asking that is I just don't understand, why would they still use this stuff if it actually all goes back to Kinsey, who died from orchitis, which happens when you masturbate too vigorously and violently. By the way, that's how Kinsey died. So can someone say poetic justice, please? And the guy literally covered for sexual pedophiles and criminals while they were still raping kids, and he wouldn't report them to the police because they wouldn't be able to continue interviewing the sexual criminals, and he wanted to continue getting their data. Okay, so for example, when they put up the Kinsey Institute, the statue of Kinsey in 2020 or 2021, guys, just a few years ago, a brand new statue of Alfred Kinsey outside of the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University. After everything we know, you can no longer, I won't attribute, what's the line? I won't attribute to stupidity what I can attribute to malice. Like, because I actually don't think the left is that stupid, guys. I don't think the leftist strategists behind our culture of death are dumb. I think they're very intentional. And so I just can't believe that it's like, oh, they just don't know what Kinsey really was about and what he did. No, I don't want to insult your intelligence that much, you leftist kooky weirdos. I think you freaking know exactly who he was, and that's where you're trying to move the culture. So I'll wrap up that question just by saying this. It wasn't all that long ago, guys, that the left said, we just want to eradicate the laws against sodomy. We just want to have gay sex in the privacy of our own bedrooms. How quickly did we go from what was the homosexual movement, by the way, decades ago, of like make sodomy legal, to bake the cake, bigot, bake the cake, florist, and if you won't bake it for our gay wedding, we're going to ruin your life and career. And and if you won't give Pete Buttigieg and his husband kids, then they believe that orphan and foster care ministries should be shut down and sued for discrimination. Wow, we went really quickly from tolerance to acceptance to celebration to participation. It always goes that way. So the left's never going to come out and say, yeah, we want to diddle the kids and we want to remove consent laws for sex. We want them to go away. They're not going to say that. But they didn't say decades ago that they wanted gay people to get married and have kids and deny them a mother. But here is where we are. So why is that stuff still in the schools? Because it's fundamentally what the left actually believes, that all people are sexual beings and there's no age assigned to such a term.
Unfortunately, I agree. I think that it comes down to, I think you both touched on this, the idea of when you break down these mores, the norms, the boundaries, it comes down to control, because these children become destabilized and they're able to be controlled.
That's right.
So, did you have any thoughts on that, Kelly?
Well, actually, I mean, just off of what you said, in Hungary, I believe it was 1919, I think it was Georgi, probably not saying his name correctly, Lukács, who, in order to install Marxism, the very first thing he did to separate the older generations with the youth was to sexualize the curricula. And this tactic's been used, before multiple times. And as we know, I think schools are promoting all kinds of things because whether it's queer theory or whatever it is, people have embraced these ideas. And really, the sad reality is that there's kids being hurt by this. And I think one of the things I want to tell every parent listening tonight is that you are in the driver's seat. You are in the driver's seat. Even when you see all of these things, you get to have the say. You are the one to stand in between you stand in between your child when they're young and the harm that is trying to not just capture their choices, but capture their hearts and their minds. And so be encouraged. Don't be afraid to speak up. Yes, people will say mean things. People will, a lot of times those are tactics that are already designed. But yes, go and speak up. Speak up and have conversations and move on with when conversations are not productive, but absolutely continue. You never know, if you're persistent, what may occur. And I will just say, in my own experience, I have experienced and seen things I never, ever, ever thought would be successful. Some things moving in a right direction. And I will also say this, one more thing, for the time being, when my two children were in the public school, they had experiences where they witnessed backlash by school staff after mom and dad spoke at a school board meeting. And guess what that did to my kids? It made them more solidified in the values of the family, because they saw how harsh and cruel some of the school staff were about my husband and I, but also particularly taking that anger out on them as little kids. And those little memories when they were in 4th grade or 1st grade stuck with them. Now my kids are teenagers and they're much older, and they know so much more. But those experiences, unfortunate as they may have been used for good to solidify what is good in them because they've seen the reality. So be encouraged, parents.
I want to say one quick encouragement is in another way on that, because you are very lucky that, not lucky, you are very wise to be involved at an early age for your children. So my kids are older and I was not in a place where I just didn't need to be involved. I thought I didn't need to be involved because everything seemed fine, right? And lo and behold, little did I know. So I want to encourage the parents that if you are looking with, it's still worth the fight, even if you're at a place where your kids might not be as eager to have their parents stand up and fight, because after all, it could embarrass them. It might be hard. And I get it. We don't want to add extra burden to them, but I'm not saying that we should do this in a way that's going to cause massive pain and heartache for the child if possible, but it's still worth fighting for them. Even if your child is like, "Mom, you're embarrassing me," like they're worth fighting for, in my opinion. So just want to encourage parents on that part too, because this was my experience. Thank you both. That was great. All right. I know we have another question next. Moderator, what do we have up next? If our school accepts federal or nonprofit grants tied to sex education, what strings are attached? Do these grants mandate certain ideological content? So you both talked about all sorts of government strings and ties and money. So I definitely want to hear on this one what your thoughts are.
Kelly, go ahead.
Well, I have been learning more about grants and funding from a friend of mine, and you can follow her on Twitter. It's at M8MA Bear, Mama Bear, but the first A is an 8. And with regards to monies being received by the school district, there's a phrase called cooperative agreements. And these cooperative agreements, or fine print, is where you're going to see the details of what is being required. So for example, I mentioned earlier school-based health clinics. A lot of the grant monies for school-based health clinics have come out of HHS, especially under the last administration. So it's important to be aware of what those grants being applied for do, and then what the fine print is. So it is a very important thing to start to pay attention to the money that your school receives and what those grants do. So whether it's the state giving money, or particularly the federal grant monies, which can come from a variety of places. And I will add this: everybody across the country, but also across the globe, suddenly everybody's talking about mental health. One of the key architects of the community schools model was interviewed back in the late 1990s. And in that interview, the interviewer asked, is mental health a big deal? Is it going to be a big deal? And the response was, oh yeah, that's the big one. So this was back in the 1990s when they were already planning for mental health programs in schools. What's interesting is that where we're at today, I remember tweeting about this a while back. We hear that sex ed is a vehicle for social change, but I think I had tweeted this, it might have been coming from Stanford, where they said that mental health was a vehicle for social change. And so what do? You have another audience of impressionable people that are seeking in a very vulnerable place to get help. And guess what can happen then? They can then receive ideas and ideology while they're at their most vulnerable place, while they're seeking help from who they think is their helper. And this comes through apps and et cetera. So this is also being implemented in schools, and the mental health and the comprehensive sexuality education. So many topics are all integrated within one another. So it's important for us to be aware of that. I hope I answered that question all right.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's great. And you are an excellent resource for being able to help explain. I'm hoping we can talk about that at another point in time of how to dive in and follow the money and be able to find those details. I know there is a lot of good resources out there. There are a lot of good resources out there for parents, but sometimes it can be a little bit of take some time to dig through it and actually uncover where that money leads. And it's very pernicious, that's for sure. Okay. Seth, did you have anything you wanted to say on that, or ready for the next question?
I'll just keep going.
All right, let's move along to our next one. Seth, thanks for the ton of information you provided. How would you recommend that we apply all of that background in the fight to save our kids?
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is power. I think, the number one response we get to my film and book, the 1916 Project, is I've never heard any of this before, because it's not because like you're dumb or don't like, it's because there's been an agenda to hide it. There has been an agenda to hide a lot of the more disturbing, darker aspects of secular progressivism or leftism or the sexual revolution. Because it's so disturbing, and most people, when they see it, when they hear it, when they know it, they would run. And my book, the 1916 Project, goes even deeper than the film. It has a lot more of it's comprehensive, but it's accessible for the layperson, for those of you interested in it, to start getting your moorings on some of this stuff. But listen, you can't just dump that all on your kids. You need that knowledge in order to understand the nature of your enemy and what you're up against. And I think a lot of people do underestimate the threat of leftist ideologies who are not in the know. They're not the mama bears like you on this call. And they kind of underestimate it, and they don't take it seriously enough. But I think post 2020, a lot of people are like, okay, when we do nothing, everything goes to hell in a handbasket. And can we still hang Anthony Fauci in the public square, please? Like, I think most people now at this point are just like, oh, wow, the left is really dirty, disgusting, pervy, and very dangerous. And it's really important that people are awakened and equipped with that information. And so how do you apply that in the fight to save your kids? I mean, just seek as much information as you possibly can so that you know what you're up against. And I think it's important to know what the cost is if you do nothing. And like, hey, maybe you pull your kids from the school. Like, I'm never sending my kids to public school, just speaking for me personally. And if you're in the ability, and this is just me speaking for Seth Gruber, but if you have the ability to pull your kids from public school, I would actually say that you have a moral mandate to do so. Unless you're in a small Midwest town and all the Christians run the local public school. But like, by and large, like, the public schools are just absolute poison. But I still care about the fight for the kids in America, even if they're not my kids, because that's what Christians do. Okay, Christians protect the young, the vulnerable, the innocent. One of the first fruits of revival, speaking from a Christian worldview, one of the first fruits of revival historically has been a concern for and protection of women and children. It's one of the first fruits that there's been a spiritual revival, is Christians start to care about protecting the young, the vulnerable, the marginalized, the voiceless again. And when I look at our society, guys, I see women and children being targeted and actually vulnerable again through the trans stuff, the women's locker room, the sports, the bathroom stuff, and the kids with the stuff in the junk in the schools and the trans stuff on the kids and killing the babies in the womb. And so, like, responsible adults care about safeguarding the next generation, even if your kids are homeschooled and they're little dragon slayer studs. You should still care about the next generation, because that's what responsible adults do, for goodness sake. And so what should you do with all this information? Know your enemy, arm yourself, research so that you know what the stakes are, what the cost of losing this is, and you can throw that filth right back into the face of the sexual revolutionaries and cultural Marxists when you encounter them, and expose them publicly for the pedophilic, demonic, anti-child agenda that they're engaged in. And when you have those facts, and you've got a few of them just on call in your memory, just a few, you can be very effective at awakening other people in your life who are maybe apolitical. They're not super leftist, but they're not conservatives, and get them mobilized, get them signed up in this fight to protect children. So that's why and how.
That is, I just want to reiterate a couple of things you said there, because you've said this in some other podcasts I've listened to too. I believe, especially in that one that I've referenced already. But are people in the Bible? What is you say this verse a lot, that my people die for lack of knowledge.
Yep.
And
my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge.
Yes. And that is really important. Like we're living in a society that is so easily distracted, right? Like it's actually a little disturbing if people haven't read A Brave New World. I strongly encourage you to read that. And remember that it's from the 20s. It is from 1920s. It's not a recent book. And it looks like a reflection of our society. You combine that with George Orwell's 1984, and it is very
Yeah.
eerie. I mean, and of course, Orwell was the student of Aldous Huxley. So, it's very, all these things again come together. In any case, that knowledge is really valuable because many of these people are not expecting you to be able to have information to fight back. And you're right, you don't have to know everything, but knowing a couple of these key facts, those connections, what Kelly, what you talked about of Advocates for Youth actually running a maze. I didn't realize that they ran a maze, but then understanding how what that their origins are, knowing that SIECUS it is coming from Planned Parenthood, and all of those things. When you connect it all, it's like, wait a second, this sounds really good, but it's really not. And it's those key facts that I want to encourage everyone. I try to say this on every event. I don't think I do, but I try to as much as possible. Don't expect to change someone's mind in one conversation. It's going to take multiple conversations to get through to people, and that's okay. You can use this information to lay the seeds or plant the seeds and lay the groundwork so that you're able to help someone maybe move over in a better path. So just keep that in mind. The knowledge is so important. Okay, I know we are already over. Do you guys have time for one more question?
Yeah.
All right, Seth, do you have time for one more question, or do you need to jump because we're already over?
I'll see if I want to answer it or if it's all.
Okay. If you need to jump, no problem. We can always have Kelly answer this one too. Let's bring up our last question for the day. All right, this is a really good one. So, why is it considered unacceptable to teach religious beliefs in public schools, but it's acceptable to promote ideologies that resemble, well, I would say they actually are like the new woke religions around identity, desire, and self-definition? These movements feel like a religion.
Okay, so I have to speak to that really quick, and then I'll let Kelly wrap up thoughts, and then I'll go because we're on a little family vacation right now. But yeah, wake up time, guys. What a great question. Let's get super uncomfortable. There will be a theocracy, and there will be a dominant morality and religion in the public square. The question is not will there be, but which one and whose. And this is an uncomfortable truth that a lot of people are going to need to wake up to, particularly the libertarians. Sorry to take pot shots. Okay, like the whole libertarian like fantasy of like, let's live and let live, man. You stay away from me, I'll stay away from you. I don't want a government in my life, all this stuff. That's not possible. Okay, it was never the case. Man needs a creed, man needs a religion to live by. That's how we're built, that's how we're made. And so when you rip God out of a society, okay, guess what? We don't enter an Elizabeth Warren Indian warlord utopia where we pet squirrels in the forest and rub each other's back. We actually just go back to demon worship. Okay, can I get an amen? Who senses that? Okay, as we took prayer out of the schools, as we weakened laws against getting divorced, as we've now redefined marriage in Obergefell, as we made it legal to kill babies in the womb, as they're now pushing along Colorado, where if you dead name your kid and you call Sam, but your son Sam wants to be Sally, that they can just take the kid from you. State-sponsored trans kidnapping is being foisted upon Colorado citizens as we speak right now, while the mean tweeting orange man is president under a like decently conservative administration. Like, who senses this, guys? Okay, you cannot have a pluralistic society where all religions and ideologies just all get along together. And of course, the left is fundamentally religious. Okay, when they say, "Hey, you can't," what's the only book that's banned in the classrooms? The Bible. Okay, not the Quran, not Playboy, not Penthouse. Okay, the only book that's banned is the Bible. Why do you think that is? Because it provides the moral and spiritual framework for the founding of this country and the only ideas that will continue to make her great. And so all we're having at the end of the day, guess what? All human conflict is ultimately theological. The culture war we're in is actually a proxy war for a far deeper spiritual war. And as a Christian, I'm unafraid to talk about this. You will have a religion in the public square. We're living under paganism, humanism, neo-Malthusianism, Darwinism, and Kinsey's sexual ethics. If it feels good, do it. Have sex with kids. Steal kids from their parents. It's Baal, Asherah, and Molech worship. You go back to the Old Testament, Ishtar or Asherah, guys, guess what that was? Orgies and weird sex cults. And guess what the other god was? Baal or Moloch, baby sacrifice. So when Gideon when the Israelites are in bondage to the Midianites, guess what God says? Gideon, walk out of your cave and go tear down the Asherah poles and the Baal statues. Weird sex cults and baby sacrifice. Huh. Wait, are you telling me that weird sex cults always go together with baby sacrifice? Oh, how interesting. What are the two gods of American culture today, guys, if not weird sex cults and child sacrifice? As it was in Judges 6, so it is today. This is a religious war, and it always was. I'm actually not calling for a religious war. I'm asking us to acknowledge what we're living in and through already. And it is a religious war. So I love that question. Thank you for the person who acknowledged and recognized that. Doesn't this all just seem theological and spiritual? And why is the left's religion acceptable, but Christianity isn't? That question deserves another 12 hours of talking about. But we deal with that at my podcast and our film, The 1916 Project. So thank you, Kelly. You can provide closing comments on that. I got to go. Missy, you're incredible. Moms for Liberty, you guys are awesome. Stay spicy.
Thanks, Seth. All right, Kelly, we actually have another question just
Sure.
for you that we would like to present as well. And I do, okay, so we've got, what advice would you give parents looking for what's being taught in their child's human growth or development or sex ed classes? Schools are hesitant to share, and when they do, how do we ensure they're actually providing those supplemental materials?
That is a very good question, and it's a challenging answer because I wish that there was a way to provide every parent out there with this hope that this particular area would be just across the board handled professionally and ethically by the school district. But we also have school districts that are hiding information with policies they've actually developed at the school to hide information from parents. So this is what I think is important. It's important to understand what's going on at the school and keep that window of communication open with your child. But I will say from experience in California and many different parent groups that got activated back in particularly 2018 and 19, when the implementation of the California Healthy Youth Act happened, we were seeing, as parents had experiences, and they would go to their district office, and the district office would show them curricula and then add or remove content after the parent had viewed the curricula, which, to my understanding, they have the legal right to do that. But I was even having school districts that, parents were telling me about, play a game of semantics where a parent would go to the school district and say, what curriculum did you adopt for teaching comprehensive sex education? And the response from the school was, we haven't adopted a curriculum, which, unless you're within a background of understanding how schools work and education, an adopted curricula is one that has been adopted and voted on by a school board. And when the California Healthy Youth Act was initially rolled out, all the curricula to fulfill the requirement was technically supplemental at the time. It wasn't being published yet in a big textbook. So that parent was told, oh no, we haven't adopted a curricula. And the conversation from the school district ended, and the parent walked away thinking, wow, this is great. They're not doing this. Well, they were, but they just didn't provide that full disclosure and all of the information and transparency that parent really ought to have been told. So I think going back to the question, how do you ensure, it is important for parents to really understand that. I noticed this when my kids were still in public school. The school issued curricula and the workbooks. We would get these workbooks home at the end of the school year, and maybe 3 pages in the entire workbook were completed. And I remember thinking to myself, what has my child been doing all year? And they were doing
Wow.
other things. They were doing other curricula, but they were also doing a lot of supplemental curricula. So we hear about programs like Teachers Pay Teachers, or even an organization called Glisten was offering supplemental curricula. There's many different companies and organizations. Even the Southern Poverty Law Center has had a division where they offer content through another program of theirs that provides supplemental curricula. And teachers can just simply go online, print something out, and provide it to their students. I remember a group of parents in Northern California, in Lake Tahoe, where their students were assigned a poem for pre-AP high school English class. And the assignment of the poem was derived from a random blog site. And it's I worship at the Church of Holy Effing S. All the expletives were in there. And I come alive. And it was this whole poem discussing, just kind of this explicit poetry, as they were calling it. It wasn't from, a well-known, established, published poet. It was just from a random blog site. And then I'll never forget also a parent whose the science teacher in middle school had printed out an article for science that was all about sex-related topics and birth control and pheromones. And it came from technically a more of an adult webzine. And the teacher had just printed this out and assigned it to the students to read, to talk about birth control pills and pheromones and same-sex relationships and whatnot. But all that to say that there's a lot of topics that might be introduced to a student that the teacher does have. Teachers individually do have a lot of autonomy in their classroom. And there's so many different resources. They're technically supposed to, I believe, run it by their director of curriculum when they purchase new books, when they add supplemental curricula, but that also does not always happen. So again, it's important to be aware. But I will say, if you're a parent of young children, young kids do not have that recall knowledge. They don't have that ability to just get right out of school and tell you something concerning that happened in their day. The way little kids are, they don't always have those verbal skills. So the younger your child is, the more challenging it will be for that child to tell you, the parent, what may have happened in a school day. So that's important to be aware of, depending on, your child. I know my child, both of my kids told me things sometimes the same day it happened. And then sometimes it was days later, it would come up in a conversation. And sometimes, I'll never forget, it was after we had started homeschooling. Our youngest saw a book in a library and said, "Oh, I remember that book. My teacher read it to me." And it was one of the many books that was teaching gender ideology and introducing it to a young child. And she didn't tell me it the day it happened. She didn't think much of it, but that recall happened when she saw the book at a library when we were visiting. So there's many different ways things can enter the school system, but as much as possible, have that connection with your teachers in school.
Yeah, you make a really good point about the supplemental educate or materials that I think is absolutely critical. And I'd love to dive in more. We can't, unfortunately, tonight, but I
Yeah.
think that it's so critical to understand that, because what we didn't really talk about too much tonight, we not directly, is the fact that because this is talked about as a comprehensive sexuality is comprehensive, means at the center of everything. So it becomes that this is something I very much meant to talk about. But it's almost like the opt-out doesn't work, because now it's okay to introduce it in math, in history, in a different way in science, not just the concept of biology and, puberty and all of that stuff, but in a very different way. And that's what's really concerning to me, I think, is the way that in language arts, and like you said, reading a poem that is about this, that just really pushes the limit. So I agree with you. I strongly encourage parents to be involved. We say be involved. What does that mean? Get involved. Talk to your teachers. Look at the curriculum. Look at what your kids are bringing home. Make a connection with them so that with the teachers, with the staff. So that is what I'm hearing, so that you can be aware of what's happening and truly protect your kids. I mean, when they're young, that innocence is only lost once, and it is so sad.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
there
it's true.
any final thoughts, or share with us where we can find you, where people can find all of your incredible resources, because you have so much good stuff to share.
More resources to come, but a lot of my content I've just publicly tweeted on X or Twitter. My handle is at KELLYSKE, and the SKE is just a simple way because my last name is so long. And so it's the last 3 letters of my last name. But Kelly SKE. I'm also at A Time to Stand, not the number 2, but the word atimettostand.me. And I'm always around responding to messages from parents and grandparents and people needing help. So don't be afraid to reach out if you're looking to find some more information, or you're trying to understand something a little more, and I'll be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. We really appreciate you tonight.
I appreciate you guys too. Thank you.
Okay, well, that wraps up our CSE 102. We went a little long, so sorry about that, folks. This topic is just absolutely, oh my goodness, it's a cesspit, but there's so much behind it. And I do believe that the history is absolutely critical to know and understand, so that you're laying a foundation and you're able to understand how this is all connected and why it feels like a conspiracy theory, because it's not a conspiracy theory. It actually is connected. So just understanding how 1 + 1 really equals 2 for real, I think gives you more power. So I hope you found this to be helpful and informative. And just a recap of what we have going on in May. We've got a couple of upcoming events, of course, left. We still have our watch party. That's next week. On Monday, the 19th, we will be watching Family Watch International's The War on Children with our guest speakers, Sharon Slater and Audrey Warner. We're going to especially be focusing on how to fight back, what you can do to respond to this. So you aren't going to want to miss that. It's a little bit more of a focus on the international, how this is being pushed internationally, but we're going to be really talking about things that you can do here at home. And then on Tuesday, the 27th, we will have the book club discussion with You're Teaching My Child What? And of course, we'll have Dr. Miriam Grossman. She's absolutely fantastic. This book is very readable. It is really, really good information, very disturbing information, very medical, lots of very medical information in there, but it's stuff that you really should know. It's very, very valuable information. So please check it out. If you're not able to read it, we have some great book reviews of it that cover the high level topics at the m4lu.org website. So that is pretty much, that'll wrap up our May month in CSE. And we've had a great semester this spring semester. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. We've covered a lot of really good topics. Stay tuned. We have some exciting topics coming up in once we have our summer break. But overall, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And just to always close us out, our famous quote from James Madison, that the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty. And of course, that is the mission of M4LU. Thank you again, and have a great evening.
So hello, everyone. Woo, that was a great, wow. That I love. Kelly did an amazing job. I'm actually hoping that she gets the link. And I sent her so that we can go on and talk some more. Oh, here she is. Let's go on. Hey, Kelly.
Great to see you.
Nice to see you too. I thought that I was going to be able to like go freshen up, go to the bath, but I was kind of so intensely watching the lecture that I sat glued. And I'm really glad that you could come on and talk some more. There's, oh my gosh, there's so many things. The number one thing that comes to mind is you mentioning that they now make these penis models that secrete things.
Right, that's true.
Where is that?
I actually had a teacher provide me with a magazine brochure that schools typically order additional resources, curricula, tools. If you're a PE teacher, you might order, resources for PE class from this website, or from this particular company. But yeah, they have a whole gamut of different models that are used for this in class. I don't know how much they get orders for it, but it's certainly something to be aware of.
Actually, I have something that I could put up that falls right in line with that, because there was a big story that was out, and I'll show.
Oh, you know what?
Here's a model. Here's one. What?
Let me send this to you. I tweeted it out February 26th of 2023.
Yes.
I'm going to send this to you right now.
And I can put it up. Right now, this is the Condom Educator Kit. And you know this group. So Advocates for Youth, in their curriculum, they have a link to this. So, and I'll bring up that image. But they have a link to this website so that teachers can, the educators, like right here. So one wooden penis model right there. And they provide a link, and that's where the link goes. So that the original image was from a classroom in Columbine High School in Colorado. And it was a freshman, basically comprehensive sexuality education class. And you can even see in the backdrop, all of the talking points were hanging up from this like kit. So,
right. Yeah. So, ETR, Education Training Research, they got their start. They're located in Santa Cruz County of California. They create the CSE curricula called Health Smart. And they actually got their start from the Santa Cruz Planned Parenthood. So yeah, that's ETR also gets, in the past, they definitely federal grant monies to do what they do. And I've talked with parents, moms in Texas who have told me that the marketing for CSE in a state like Texas is going to be completely different than how they market CSE in California, and that there's definitely a little bit of a difference if you're researching and paying attention to the messaging that goes out, that it can often be different based on the audience that they're
seeking. Are you saying it'll be more, they'll try to appeal to understanding that maybe this area is a little more conservative. And so maybe they're going to say that we also do abstinence education.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, the states that will refer to, for example, comprehensive health education versus comprehensive sexuality education, or even family life curricula. So family life sounds so nice.
Yeah. And then something, and that has aspects of CSC in it, family life.
Yeah. And then even the organization SHAPE, which is particularly for health education, SHAPE held a conference not that long ago. I want to say it was at the earlier part of this year, it may have been, but SHAPE also works to advance comprehensive sexuality education. So that's important for parents, PE teachers, everybody to be aware of. There's plenty of good teachers out there that are not for this. I can't imagine having to be tasked as a teacher with having to teach young people this.
So I'm going to share. What I often do is I'll just kind of go through my X account, because there's so much on there, and it's easier to pull that up. But
Yeah.
and I know you know this image, but so you can see here, this is an image direct. I mean, look at that. This is from CSE. I know about this because actually maybe now almost 3 years ago, it was discovered that this curriculum was in Wisconsin, and in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. This image is a direct image from the Advocates for Youth 3 R's curriculum that was going to be used for 2nd through 4th graders. And in the curriculum, in the teacher portion, the notes to the teacher said that the students should get in groups of 6, and they should not be sex specific. So they should be girls and boys together. They should have Post-it notes. And then this image would be up, kind of on the chalkboard, or if it's a whiteboard. And then the kids would either use Post-it notes, or if it's a whiteboard, they would, use a dry erase marker, and they'd have to label all 6 parts of the external female anatomy. And I'm not going to say all the names here, but you can see that, and that X was put there by myself. So that is not, the kids would get the full image. And I just find that just shocking.
I remember back when we were going to the Department of Education and challenging the health framework updates in 2019. And there was a book for 3rd graders. And the book was an illustrated cartoon of a man and a woman. Basically, it was the cartoon of just the genitalia already having sex. And then it showed, the little sperm swimming. But I'll never forget talking with some young people who were there at the California Department of Education as activists in support of the health framework. And they dropped a couple expletives when they saw what was being, one of the moms had a big poster up showing the image while the mom in front, or the parent in front, was talking about that particular book. But you could see it live streamed, and even the activists who were there said, "What the expletive is that?" And said it a couple times. And I said, well, that's what you're here to support. That's part of the health framework. That's for 3rd grade. They were upset by it. And, it just goes to show that there's a lot of young people who are captured believing that they're doing something for inclusive rights, is what they're told. And oftentimes, I talked about this a little bit in the presentation, is you'll look at people who are really, really trying to promote their ideology, their comprehensive sexuality education through storytelling, and they want to share the stories and experiences of people. And without seeing the evidence, stories are definitely people's experiences or stories are compelling for some, but they only go so far. The evidence, like what you're showing us right now, and what that particular day did for those young, either high school or college kids, was they were faced with the real evidence. And so the evidence is really what
these images are always a lot. I always find someone who's never seen, like here, the gender unicorn. And so this graphic is by TSER, the Trans Student Educational Resources. they teach children that their feelings and behaviors are a more important indicator of their identity rather than their body. But so here's names you know. So these are all of the different organizations that are the Trojan horse organizations that come into schools, and all the radical ideologies are injected. Welcoming schools. And you know, what maybe like really briefly, what is welcoming schools? Is it, because it sounds good, right? Welcoming schools, belonging.
Right.
Isn't that nice? What is it?
Ultimately, a lot of these programs like this one is designed to instruct young people in gender ideology. And as we see today, I mean, just like we talked about how there's CSE and then how that develops into this advancement of these school-based health centers underneath the WISC model of community schools, you have an idea that could potentially be multifaceted as far as what it does. But if a young person starts to question their very identity or starts to think, well, maybe I am this or maybe I'm this, well, there's a whole industry waiting to make money off of that young person's health. Ultimately, there's a whole agenda looking to make them lifelong patients that harms them. So these incredible. They're all, again, the marketing is incredible. It's interesting with Advocates for Youth. I see them there on that screen, but it is interesting that they changed their name because they were the Center for Population Options. And that is a piece of this that, you know, again, this is a multifaceted agenda that does have some history with trying to reduce the population. For sure.
So that's something put a pin in I wanted to get back to, but Welcoming Schools is part of the Human Rights Campaign. And I have here, like, this is a gender inclusive classroom guide, a year-long curriculum to create safe, supportive, and affirming classrooms. So this was gender inclusive classrooms 23 to 24. They go month by month. I mean, they cite books that you could read, themes, boards, then links to tons of other materials, links to downloadable posters, printable signs, PDFs, pronoun charts. And again, this is preschool. And I will show this more at some other point because no one can see what I'm looking at. But needless to say that this is a very comprehensive curriculum, and an educator can get this free of charge. And it's sent PDF, and then they can get free books and materials. And Welcoming Schools is a packet provided by the Human Rights Campaign. And what I have seen in Wisconsin with our state education, and I've seen it in other states too, is they'll say these materials are free. Isn't this great? We can use them. They link them up on board docs. They put them up on the websites. And, you know, a lot of school districts are struggling with cash. So they think, okay, I've got to hit these DEI goals. I'll just use this material. It's free. They don't really even look at it. They just pass it along. And then once, like you said, they see the evidence, they see what's in there, they're genuinely surprised. But by then, the Trojan horse has entered the school. There are woke activist educators. I have seen even as few as just one in an entire school district that just brings that district down to its knees because what they start to do. Now, Trump is in office. We've got executive orders. We've got the Department of Education under Secretary Linda McMahon saying, you got to stop this. They've now, ended the whole Biden Title IX definition that includes gender identity. Yet the woke persist. All of these things that you see here, safe schools, GSA clubs, rainbow clubs, advocates for youth. Listen, they are all still operating. And I know because I attend their trainings, I get their emails, I get their texts several times a day. They are operating in schools right now, red states, blue states, they persist. So what can we do, Kelly?
I think we have to continue to inform and equip people, show people the evidence. I think it's impactful to have, if you feel comfortable opening your home, if you've obtained some helpful information, share that information with others in your house. Start to educate and inform people, because a lot of people, they don't have time to research all of the history and follow all the emails. And like you said, you're getting texts, emails. They may not even know all of the organizations or where this originates. And people have so much bandwidth to really, I'm going to grab something here, process.
I know I'm grabbing my stuff to like all my different, like this is a new book, Stay Angry Little Girl, Pride Puppy. I think I don't have the mirroring on, but keep when you see new books, make it aware. I think keep it simple too. When we have been fighting this, if you get too deep into the weeds, then people tune out. So we kept the Amaze videos, exactly what you said when you were talking to Melissa. The Amaze videos are so disturbing. And and there's a weird feeling to it, because even sometimes there's some of the videos where the content, like how many times is too much to masturbate. Now that right off the bat, ding, 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 this is crazy. But there are other where it's subtle, like you said, where there's mom and dad, but dad is feminine, mom is butch. The kids are all different, like races, and one, and you can't tell the boys from the girls. It's not the way the books used to look, where, you had mom and dad were clearly identified as male, female, and the kids weren't, ambiguous. And so you see that a lot, right? Like there's many messages.
And a lot of these people don't really value the importance of childhood development and the imagination of children. And so I remember meeting this mom who was coming with us to challenge CSE, and these parents of these kindergartners were not notified that the teacher was going to do this coming out celebration for one of the kindergartners in class, and what that did to the other children who are very, very young. I mean, these are kids who believe in all kinds of stuff.
They do tooth theory. They pick their nose and they eat the boogers. I mean, they're not.
I mean, they think that when St. Patrick's Day is celebrated at school, that there's really leprechauns that went to their classroom. Little kids have just this vast imagination. But what that exercise did for this kindergarten class is that little kids were now having trouble sleeping because of the fact that they were worried that they were going to wake up the next day. A little girl was worried she was going to wake up the next day a boy. Mommy, I'm scared to go to sleep because what if I wake up tomorrow and I'm a boy? And these are things that the people promoting these ideas, they don't value the actual health or mental health or longevity or relationships or life of these young people. It's a completely different mentality and viewpoint of a human itself. While we were talking about different things, I grabbed this. This I first exposed years ago. So I was sent this by a teacher, but this is the I'm Here badge. And it's given out by the largest teachers union in the country, the National Education Association. It comes in a little sleeve. And in the sleeve, it basically instructs the wearer, because you can put this on your lanyard at school. And what this does is it instructs them that if they're not a safe person to not wear this, And so it's creating already an idea. I mentioned this in our presentation tonight. If you have a safe person or a safe space or a trusted person or whatever it may be, you're automatically creating the belief system that if you do not conform to our way of thinking, you are going to be labeled unsafe, untrusted. This is an unsafe person, unsafe space, etc. So they're using this as a manipulation tactic. But that's the back of it. NEA's LGBTQ plus caucus. There is a QR code with a variety of resources,
Wow.
including a Santa Clara all ages transgender clinic. But you can see, NEA, this has CTA, that's the California Teachers Association on the back. So that's what they're encouraging.
Like that image right here, like every color of the flag, but on the back, wow.
And then there's teachers that will encourage students, minors, to go and approach other teachers that don't have the badge or don't have the signage in their classroom. And they'll say, we want to meet with you because we demand that you put this up and let us know that this classroom is a safe space. Things like this are happening.
That's like Gestapo-ish. That's like so gross. Like to have kids go ratting out adults and like,
It's actually really, it's sad and it's disturbing the ways in which the kids are being used as leverage for their political agenda. I mean, we're seeing an increase of students that are being taught through, for example, in California, the State Seal of Civic Engagement program, to go out and register voters, to serve on their school boards as a school board member, typically a school board member that can't vote, but all of these political activist things. Whereas I remember when I was in high school, when you were probably in high school, Scarlett, what were we doing in our free time when we were finished with our homework? We were hanging out with our friends. We were going roller skating. We were going to sports games.
Yeah.
We were hanging out. We were going to the beach.
Like this. No, teachers were never trying to get us engaged in this kind of activism. Never. Like, I'm sure that they were not like Reagan, Bush conservatives, but then it was like, that stuff's for the home. When you come to school, maybe they talk about politics in a way where you're like, oh, because my parents were very conservative. Well, they're not conservative, but they didn't cross the line. There is no line anymore. This is crazy. I wanted to share, because I have a very similar story, and I wanted to put this book up, where a parent contacted me, a mom, and she said that after a kindergarten class in an area, Oak Creek, Wisconsin, which is a suburban area, it is more conservative, but a teacher had read this book, or a school librarian had read this book to the kids during library time. And if you have young kids, that going to the library in school when they're younger is a treat. Once or twice a week, they go to the library, they get to go to the resource center, they get to pick out books. And if they return them, bring them with, then they can get new books. And the kids love this. I used to volunteer in the school library, and it was so much fun. I could read to the kids and help them pick out books and check out books. They loved it. This was a real treat. So this was one of the books that was read, and her son came home and said, Mom, I'm scared. I'm scared that if I go to sleep and I wake up, I might turn into a girl. And she's like, that can't happen. And he's like, yes, it can. Boys can be girls. Boys can turn into girls, and I don't want to, and I'm scared. And so she asked me, what should I do? What should I do? And I was like, honestly, like, if it were me, I'd be done. I would not send my child back into that classroom until I did some serious investigating, and maybe never again. I am not like risking the fact that a staff member was so blatantly pushing this on kids, scaring them, really, really frightens me. They're so young. And this boy genuinely thought that this could happen to him. you know, that he could wake up and suddenly he wants to wear a dress and he wants to be a boy, and it was like contagious.
Yeah. Well, and truly, I mean, one of the things I talked about in our presentation tonight, we see all these things that all of these ideologies, CSE, gender ideology within it, and its correlation into other subjects in the library and books, what it is promoting and teaching, but is also so much of what is missing. There is so much missing, and there is a complete disregard in this curricula for the beauty and value of a child, of those childhood years and teen years. I remember being told this by my parents when I was growing up, is that you have, you know, assuming you have a full, long lifespan, you have such a short time in your life where you get to be a child. And it's such a gift. You have the rest of your life to be an adult. And what is missing from these very people that say they're the proponents of kindness, of conflict resolution, of safety, they use these words, compassion, is that there's really actually a disregard for the value of a child, of a teenager. It's a complete disregard of the family. It's a complete disregard of caring for a child's health and well-being. It's a complete disregard for assuming things about the child. And it's oftentimes just treating these young people as if, you know, I'm just going to do what I want and they have to accept whatever I'm teaching them, like these kids that then go to bed and they worry they're going to wake up the next day as something else. And what they're doing to kids, they don't care. They don't actually value these kids. They just care about their agenda more than anything else. And that's heartbreaking, because true compassion, true empathy, true love seeks to place others above yourself, not in a way that's disregarding or diminishing of oneself, but in a way to esteem somebody else above yourself. What a beautiful thing that is. And that is what parents do. And this is also...
parents don't have discussions about how many times is too many to masturbate in one day with their little kids. You can see, look at, this is a tiny sample, but 6th and 7th graders, how to use condoms correctly. My daughter's in 7th grade. The thought that there is an educator or a Planned Parenthood representative in a classroom and my daughter would have to sit through this next to a boy. First of all, she would run. Okay, I've raised, but she would scream and run out of that classroom. But just the thought of their kids, my daughter's age, sitting through this when they don't want to hear it, they're unprepared. It makes my blood, Kelly, my blood just boils. I just imagine, I can't believe the nerve of these adults that think that they have the right to do this, to put on demonstrations like this, and they don't even need, like, they scoff at opt-outs. Oh, well, I'm sorry that you're such a prude, you know. Well, you know what? I think it's normal and common sense to not want this in 6th and 7th grade. But my position is, and I don't know what you think about that, but if Planned Parenthood could come in with these condoms and wooden penis models and talk about how many times is too many to masturbate in a day, why can't a Catholic priest come in and teach abstinence education? What is the difference? The idea that Planned Parenthood can come in and just as an outside spectator, oh, we've got no interest, we're just going to come in and teach this curriculum out of the goodness of our hearts. You know, we have no bias. Give me a break. Give me a break. Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. You don't have any bias. Of course you have bias, you know, because your hope is that these condoms don't work and that some girl ends up pregnant, or we can't call her a girl, you know, because God knows males can be pregnant, you know, men can be pregnant too. And that's part of Advocates for Youth. You're not allowed to say men, women. You have to say inseminated persons and persons with a vulva, all this garbage that they're saying to our children. it's crazy town. Like it's a clown car crazy town, you know, and I for one am sick of it. I'm sorry I had to go off on that rant.
No, I mean, and what's interesting is that they often present these ideas under the guise of safety, but the way in which they're taught is oftentimes accelerated in the whole of the curricula. And what I mean by that is from analyzing a variety of these curricular materials, the actual quote unquote safety is quickly glossed over, and it's done usually in such a way as to, again, reduce a child's natural modesty. I'll never forget when I was in high school, that organization came into my health class, and they had various students come into the front of the class. So we have these two guest speakers, both women, and the rest of my peers are there, and we've never met these two women, don't know them at all. And students are being asked to take the model that was provided by that organization, lift it into the erect placement, and then put the condom on. But it was all done very quickly. It was all done very giggly. These are not actual ways to ensure. I mean, you think about how reading is taught today.
Yeah.
You take any subject that is actually for a purpose, reading comprehension, you know, if you're actually teaching something about health and safety, you think you'd want to do it in a more professional, educational way, because then your audience would, quote, be safe. But the reality is a lot of these programs, the way in which they're done is the most important piece to pay attention to, because it's often a way to reduce a child's natural, healthy boundaries. And it's not actually a way to ensure their safety. But because they did it, they can check that box and say, oh, we taught them, quote unquote, safety. Now, that lesson that you just shared, I think it said 6th and 7th graders. I think about everyday 6th and 7th graders. If you're teaching kids, teenagers, how to clean something at home or how to use the washing machine. Maybe you purchase a new washer and dryer and you're showing the kids how to use it. It might take a couple times of them learning the different settings on the new washer and dryer to understand even how to do that, let alone, and they'll come back to you, Mom, Dad, like, how do I use the washer and dryer? Like, what button do I press?
I don't know how.
What do I have to do for this load? And, you know, does it need to be, how do I choose cold water or delicate cycle?
Yeah.
You know, but we're talking about their health. And this particular topic is just quickly done on their digital sex ed curriculum that they're working to advance. That curricula is this very short video that speeds up. It's actually rather quickly discussed and shown. And there's this quick review, and there is no way a teenager is going to be like, oh yeah, now I've got it. I've been able to completely understand how this works, and I can do this if I'm in this situation. No, they are checking a box, in my opinion, and they are just doing it in a way that, again, if they can be in so many schools, they're going to get money for that. That money goes from the government down into the school district and out to their organization. And if they really cared, quote, as they do, about inclusive health, safety of young people, and it's we have to, we're the ones keeping them safe. If that's really the case, then make all your content open access.
Yes.
If that's really the case, then why is it so hard to see your curriculum? What about all the kids that don't have access to your curriculum because we can only pay you, and school districts can only pay you exorbitant amounts of money to access your health and safety content that you oftentimes develop with grants from the government?
And yes, that's what I wanted to say. How dare they withhold this curriculum when it's being paid for by federal dollars? And we know that because right now in the Congress, they're going through the process of reconciliation. And right now there are many Republicans, and we are encouraging this. So please call to action, contact your congressmen and demand that they defund Planned Parenthood, because Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of sex education in U.S. public schools. I think 80%, upwards of 80% of the materials that are in your classroom or the instructors or in some way Planned Parenthood is behind sex it's because it's not just sex education, right? It's they even, yes, they get into abstinence, because a lot of states like Wisconsin require that the schools talk about abstinence, and they go over that real fast. Like they don't want to dwell on that too often. They laugh it off. You made a really good comment. They make the people that are waiting until marriage, or maybe waiting until they're more mature, look like dorks. They have pimples, they have braces, they're not cool. And then the people that are having sex are all, they're pretty, they're cool, they're part of the in crowd. All these subliminal messages to kids that it's just not cool. There's even one Amaze video where what was it called? It was like so something about pregnancy, and it had some catchy title. But the teenage girl was pregnant, and they show the clinic, which is supposed to be reminiscent of a pro-life, a Catholic clinic where they encourage the women to keep their babies, the crisis pregnancy centers, and they put a big X through it, and they made the person standing outside look evil and sinister, and it was like scary. Don't go there. Oh, don't go there. And then they had the bright, shiny, like Planned Parenthood. Oh, it was so pretty. Oh, that's where the nice people are. The messaging there could not be more clear.
Yeah. It's really true. Yeah. It's there's marketing in all of this. I'll never forget. I know we're talking about CSE, but this is another topic that will probably definitely, I would say, relate to CSE, is education technology. When we were at Moms for Liberty, Philadelphia, the hotel where we were at was hosting a lot of attendees from this ISTE education conference. ISTE is the International Society for Technology and Education. Many of the attendees there at that conference were companies that were showcasing their ed tech. Well, in the midst of being in the lobby, there was these long tables, and I was seated there, and this whole company just happened to be there, and they were having a meeting that was very loud, and they're literally seated right next to me. But in their meeting, they were talking about, in review from being at ISTE, that for their ed tech program, they wanted to add into their technology the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and that they wanted to work on marketing more to the school districts, school board members, and staff, and then prepare the messaging to get their buy-in, and then the parents and public's buy-in. And this is how, I mean, I've said this is kind of funny, but if you're late at night and you're flipping channels, lots of times you might come across some as seen on TV infomercial, and a lot of people will go, oh brother, there's the fake clapping audience, there's the little thing that they're trying to sell you, change the channel. But in actuality, that overt marketing is happening with everything with regards to CSE, to these Amaze videos. It's going on. Your kids are being marketed to, you're being marketed to. If you're a school teacher, school board member, etc., you are being marketed to. And I hope that more people would start to have that awareness of the marketing that is being driven their way, the narratives, the storytelling, the graphics, the language used. I mean, just the way in which, for example, comprehensive sexuality education is marketed as inclusive sex ed. So that automatically frames it as, if you're against it, you're against inclusiveness, and you're exclusive, you're pushing people away, and you're some kind of hateful person. So that's by design. It's no different than the card I showed that talks about the safe person, safe space. that automatically means that if you don't have this badge, you don't display this poster, you're unsafe. Your space, your classroom is unsafe. If you're against social emotional learning, which is often marketed to teachers and students as conflict resolution, as kindness, as all of those kinds of things, well, then it's automatically creating a narrative so that anything that you try and say is designed to make you look like you're the one going against something that's common sense. And so
I wanted to play, I did find that video, so I'm going to share the screen and play it really fast. Let's see, I got it right here. Here we go.
I don't know what's wrong with me lately. I feel nauseated and I'm so tired all the time. Ooh. Wow. That's a good pickle.
Nauseated? Tired? Pickles. I know what's going on here.
Sex can and should feel good, both physically and emotionally. But sex can also bring concern and worry. Unprotected sex can lead to unplanned pregnancy. If you know someone who's had unprotected sex or they missed their period after having sex, they may be pregnant. Other signs of pregnancy may include sore breasts, nausea or vomiting, mood swings, or feeling very tired. Although having some of these symptoms does not necessarily mean a person is pregnant. To find out if your friend is pregnant, they can take a home pregnancy test.
Hold on, real quick, I want to interject. Did you see that the person vomiting looked like a male?
Yeah.
I mean, so again, the clues, it's vomiting like they're pregnant, clearly like a
These tests are available in grocery stores, drugstores, and local family planning clinics like Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
To take a pregnancy test correctly, make sure to read and follow the directions that come inside the package. Most simply require that the person pees on the stick. If the test is negative, your friend should watch for their period. They may want to take another test in a few days just to make sure. If the home pregnancy test is positive, or if your friend's normal period does not return within 4 weeks, it's important that they talk with a trusted adult and visit a healthcare provider or
again, trusted adult, not parent, trusted adult.
family planning clinic you trust. Be aware that there are some clinics that trick women into coming.
See, look at this. This is a good one. The really real clinic. And then she says they trick.
To them for pregnancy options counseling, but then do not accurately provide all of the information or talk honestly about all of the options open to a pregnant person. There are 3 options
Pregnant
open to a person.
Yep. So I'll stop there. You see, that was one where the really real clinic, and then the goofy guy, and they're saying, yeah, they pretend to be a clinic, but they're not going to give you the accurate information, Planned Parenthood. Now that's where you need to go, but don't go to that fake, clinic where they're going to probably tell you to keep your baby. And this, this is for middle school. So you think you're pregnant is a middle school lesson. Why the heck? I mean, now, Kelly, you know that they're going to say, well, yeah, it happens. There are cases where there are abused kids, or some communities, they'll say, where there will be young kids getting pregnant. But why? That is not the norm. But so why do we have to treat every kid like they're from an abusive background with parents that don't care, they're promiscuous, sexually active, and they're getting pregnant in 6th and 7th grade? Why does every kid need to be treated that way when it is a small minority of kids where that might happen? And if it does, that child is in an unsafe situation and teachers are mandatory reporters. This isn't the cause for let's develop a new curriculum. This is let's call the police, let's call CPS, and let's try and get this child into a better environment.
It's total marketing. I mean, what they're doing is they're trying to shape a perspective and a worldview. And sadly, I mean, There's some of these people working in that industry, and they think they're being empathetic and helpful and compassionate, and they just don't realize they don't. Some people know exactly what they're doing. Others don't have an idea of what they're being a part of, and the damage that it does to young people. I mean, I so appreciate that Monica did share that she at CSE 101 that she used to teach CSE, that she was trained in this, and then she got out of that, and now she speaks out against it.
Yes.
And the training that she had, I mean, a lot of these people do think that they're somehow being accepting of others and loving or compassionate, but it's oftentimes not enough information that they have, I would say, and oftentimes they think they have comprehensive information and they don't. And then in addition to that, I think many of them believe a lie that what they're doing is empathetic or compassionate, when in actuality, it's the exact opposite.
And you can see here, so this is right from Planned Parenthood of the Pacific Southwest, but they advocate for effective sex education. And then when you go through this for more information about that, and they brag about getting about the education. So sex ed programs, community and school programs. So the evidence-based education delivered by experts are robust, comprehensive sex education programs, give all the information you need. We offer in-person and virtual presentations at schools and communities. So you can request professional training. Look at all this. It's all right here.
Right. Well, and when they say evidence-based, or I don't know if you can click back and go to the previous page just briefly, it was evidence-based. And then on the last page, it was effective. So right there, that begs then the question, where's the evidence of its effectiveness? How have you studied this? In what measures? What other entities have you used to then prove that it is indeed effective or quote evidence-based? Because oftentimes this is an area that does get to me a little bit, because when I was in college, I remember learning all about conducting actual studies. And what is being called evidence-based, what is being used and called a study today, is oftentimes not a study. In order to actually conduct a study, the people doing the study are not supposed to have a stance on what they're studying. And then the sample size is important, and the length of time. There's all these varying factors in conducting any evidence or studies.
How about profit? Hundreds of millions of dollars. Do you think that they're going to come up with the evidence that, oh, actually what we do doesn't work? Darn. I guess we're going to have to not request the money anymore. Give me a break. They make money off of this. This is their bread and butter. So of course, the evidence proves 100% what we do is so effective. And look at community-based education, community schools, professionals. So what is this? Compliance with the California Healthy Youth Act.
Yep. With the ACLU. So they worked with the ACLU. My understanding is that there was a letter sent to every district in the state of California basically saying, you need to implement this by the implementation deadline or you will be sued.
Wow. And I also wanted to point out what the gender affirming part, if I can find that, where what are they doing now? Because now they're getting involved in gender affirming care. So why are they doing that? I know that you know. So to explain, they've been successful in what you said, population decline, have they not? So now they need a new form of revenue.
So before we move on to that, while we were still talking about evidence,
okay,
I just sent you an older tweet of mine It's from a document called The Evidence Base for Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And on page 4, under 4.2, section 4.2, where it says main conclusions of the evidence reviews, it says this in quote, "It is difficult to draw strong conclusions about the impact of CSE on biological outcomes such as STI or HIV rates, as there are still relatively few high-quality trials available, particularly those that take a longitudinal approach." And then it quotes Fauner et al. 2014, Lopez et al. 2016. But all that to say, they're appearing to openly admit that there's not really evidence to support that their approach is so fabulous. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
No. Yeah.
We're being conned. We're being broadly conned. And again, this is for organizations like this. We often talk about the money spent per student in different states and across the country. And money regularly is flowing from the federal and the federal government and the states into school districts. And then from that, it is often going right out to these private organizations, which oftentimes serve political goals and other agendas. So you have organizations like, for example, we're talking about Planned Parenthood. Money goes into the school system and then can go out to Planned Parenthood for sex education. Down in 2019, I think it was reported that Planned Parenthood was going to be helping start and launch 50 school-based health centers down in Southern California and Los Angeles. Again, that's money, taxpayer money going into the school and out to that organization. And then what does that organization do with funds? They lobby. They also help get certain people elected. I'll never forget how quickly someone I know was running for school board, and within 24 hours of setting up their account, their first email came in from Planned Parenthood. So that's how fast and how involved they are politically and getting their people to elected positions, ranging from school board, city council, all the way to the top. And again, money for schools ought to actually benefit and enrich students. Students we talk about aren't reading. The literacy rates are declining. We were just talking about the books that they promote in schools. And I used to volunteer in the school library too. I watched as the librarian was getting rid of wonderful literature and bringing in literature like that. I remember when, and I was hesitant to homeschool big time because I used to be against it. And I'm not anymore. I've had a complete change.
Or just, I think a lot of people are not against it. They just think I can't do that. That's like,
right.
There's no way I could.
There's so many ideas out there, and I had all the bad ones in my mind, and I was the last person being willing to agree to homeschool because my kids were asking me to, and I was thinking, no, that won't be happening. But I will say, for my part, having been raised in public school and previously having our children in public school and watching some of the struggles with reading when the school became more of the predominant I don't know. In a way, my children were more entertained by and interested in the books that were at the school than the books that I had been collecting since I was a child. But when we started homeschooling, there were books in the curriculum that I had never read growing up. We had read alouds that I would read to the kids, and then they also had their own readers. And these were all books I had never read in public school, but we loved them. They were fantastic. I remember just when our youngest was really young, I had never read The Witch of Blackbird Pond. That was an excellent book. It was an excellent book. Actually, it made me oftentimes think about the ways in which today's culture, cancel culture, immediately assuming things about people and kind of jumping down their throat in a way, is very similar to what happens in that book, The Witch of Blackbird Pond, where towards the end, this girl is being accused of being a witch. And ultimately, I'm not going to give the book away. Everybody should read it, but it's a very interesting book. And if you think about what was happening in that book, and then start to think about what we've been through the last 5 years with BLM, with Antifa, with people being chased out of restaurants by activist protesting groups, with people being, targeted and canceled and shouted at school board meetings. It is really similar. So all this to say, they're again, we're looking at all these books that they're bringing in, needing to be doing that. But it's also what they're getting rid of. They're getting rid of so many good things.
Yes, they're getting rid of. I talked about that with Jamie and Rosalind today. That libraries are waste management, large containers, and they're dumping out books because they're too old and they're outdated, they're racist, or they're, and then they're bringing in all these. Frankly, they're just, they don't write like they used to. I used to read so avidly and nonfiction and fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And you could actually go to the bookstore, go to the library, and you could get a good romance book or a good mystery detective book and, try an unknown author. But now, the story, there isn't the same level of storytelling. And now that they've decided to just stomp all over the hero's journey and wipe out the single greatest formula that human beings love in a story, the hero's journey. Now they have to crap all over it and make everything angsty, complicated, and end badly, and the heroes don't win, and it's awful. It's awful. They ruined Star Wars in a lot of ways. They're ruining the MC. I'm a big fan. Marvel. I loved Marvel, and then now the new Marvel is it's so weird. They're trying so hard instead of just going with what people want and what's good for us, for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of stories, the fairy tales, these stories, like Jordan Peterson has said, they have value and meaning. They're deeper and more profound than we can possibly imagine. We can't erase these stories and try and remake humans in the image of I don't know what, a soulless, genderless, human beings that are more like machines. It's sad, and it goes against our nature. So they're not going to win in the end. I know that, but how much pain has to happen until that point? How many kids have to wander aimlessly? How many kids aren't in relationships? I mean, part of the reason why Planned Parenthood has to start, peddling puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones are because kids aren't having sex. They're not in relationships. Boys are isolated. Girls are too busy shaving their heads and dressing up like they're in The Handmaid's Tale when they're so oppressed. There isn't anything more oppressed than a white woke woman who attends Harvard or Yale. Who could be more oppressed than that? It's ridiculous. We should be laughing. We should be laughing instead of appeasing.
Right. Yeah. There's so much. I mean, I know I think about the things that are missing. I mean, even libraries today are, I'll never forget visiting a school that had gone completely tech, 100% technology based. And I had remembered visiting this school in the past, but now the school had changed the library, and the library, I remember what it was, and walked into the library and I said, where are all the books? and they said, oh, we don't have any books. They're all digital. So the whole library was empty, just with a bunch of couches. And then what had been the librarian's desk was just a place to rent out tablets to read on a tablet. And I've collected books. I love to read, which is why I've done so much research, because I enjoy reading and learning. But my goodness, if everything is on technology, if you don't get to hold a book in your hand and feel the book and turn the pages, that just takes away so much, I think. And it can also pose, I mean, there's some people that are talking about the real concerns of if everything does move in that direction, if books are being taken out of libraries, classics, originals, historical books, what does that mean for history? And it means, I mean, it's a little bit something to think about, I think, at least. If everything does go digital, what resources are out there? I remember when my kids had to do a few projects when we were homeschooling. And while homeschooling, we had some different projects. I remember as a child being able to go down to the library, and there was almost so many books on a given topic at the public library. I'm not talking about the school library, that you had more than enough to do a report on all kinds of things. And this is way back when, where we had to use the card catalog and
I know.
all of that.
Do you see this article there? Struggling to keep up with increasing digitization in academia, libraries are purging older volumes to make way for study spaces and coffee shops.
Yeah.
They're getting rid of books so they can have coffee shops. And this is so sad. A library without books. Not quite, but it's pretty much that's what they're becoming. Libraries without books. Instead, there's coffee shops and study spaces.
Well, I find we were called for a long time there. We were called book banners, but I find it interesting that it is often the libraries at the schools and the public libraries themselves that are eliminating books. They're having tons of book sales. And then when you're a student, your only resource for whether you're homeschooled or public or private schooled, your resources are websites, which I remember when the internet came out and teachers were saying you could only use the internet as like one additional source, which was like a big deal, but all your main sources need to be books. And now we're watching that flip, where most kids, when they're doing projects, their teachers are telling them to use various websites. But the reality is the books are important. I remember in California, they often had kids do like a California history project or like a missions report. There was next to no books on that when I took my kids to do that project. But when I was in school, tons of books on the topic. So who is really getting rid of the books? It's certainly not us, but it's always this particular group of activists that like to point the finger at one side, while three are pointing back at them. And they're actually the ones oftentimes doing what they say we're doing.
Yep.
So,
this is the truth about banned books. Left claims that progressive books are being censored. And the research basically shows that that is not the case, that all that parents are asking for is that predominantly in elementary and middle schools, that age inappropriate, highly sexual books that are laden with gender ideology and characters actively like transitioning. And then these books are more like they're comics. Most of the books like Fun Home, Gender Queer, a lot of them, there's no literary value to these books. It's just, you can't even say, well, it was so well written, I just didn't like the images. It's poorly written and depressing, and the parents are always terrible if they're not abusers, and the kids are getting involved in sexual situations and crude language. sexual relationships with teachers, incest, every bad thing is happening in these books, but they have a gay character, or now more than ever, they have a trans character. And because of that, now the books are the holy grail. These books are the most beautiful, wonderful things ever because there's a transgender character. And that's why Gays Against Groomers stands with us. You know, we are aligned. We work with them because they don't like the fact that throwing in a gay character on a book that's garbage and porn and basically it's child abuse for children, but you throw in a gay character and then you say, oh, LGBTQIA plus, and that's why they say not in our name, that they don't want their movement to be commingled with this abusive push by the woke activists that to me is just a way, again, Trojan horse, a way to bring in child predators to legitimize predatory behavior. And basically it's the wolf in sheep clothing. It's telling predators all you have to do is get in drag, pretend to be trans, whatever, and then you can have easy access to your prey because no one can question you if you say that you're trans. You are automatically morally superior simply because you identify as a different gender or something. And that is why this thinking is dangerous, because it takes down all of the fences, like Chesterton. Just rip down all the fences and don't ask why do we have these, why do we gatekeep? Why do we gatekeep with children? Why are we so protective of childhood innocence? Why have, as a society, for at least in Western society, why have we decided that it's really important for us to let children have this golden period of innocence for as long as possible? And and instead it's like, no, knock down all the fences, treat, like you said, treat kids like adults, adults like kids, teach kids that they can consent, and let's just see what happens. And I think
you made a really good point with just now, because you were talking about predator and prey and this idea of easy access. One of the things that I remember thinking was way backwards and concerning when my kids were still in the public school system is that parents were being required to undergo background checks and fingerprinting in order to volunteer at the school. But if you're a guest speaker, if you're coming in as a guest speaker from Planned Parenthood or anywhere else, no background check, no fingerprinting.
Really?
Nothing. Yes.
I still have to get a background check every year to volunteer at my kids' school, and they don't have to?
Yeah, the guest speakers were not required to provide any background check at all. And I also am concerned that those being paid exorbitant amounts to create curricula for schools might also not be background checked. I'm seeing some things here in California that are highly concerning. But I would say included in that is who is either being paid to come into the school without any knowledge. I mean, if you're a school teacher, they're supposed to go through, as school staff and teachers, background checks and whatnot. But I mean, it seems like, I don't know every single state, but I would call on everybody listening, every mom out there. This needs to change, I think. I think personally, the fact that parents are being asked to do this, but you can have access just because you're from some nonprofit and a teacher happened to know you. I'll never forget this. This was shared with me back in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This was somewhere during the time of the COVID shutdown because there was a Zoom class, and this teacher invited a man to speak to her elementary school class. This man had, he was an activist, and he had a whole social media page that was very explicit and graphic. And this person, I would venture to guess, was not background checked or anything.
Yeah.
who has access to your kids just because your teacher or your school district invited them, and what is really. So again, I know in the presentation, I was able to talk about curricula, and one of the attendees asked that question at the end about being vigilant and aware of what do we do? How do we find out if they're giving us everything or not? And there's not really a great hopeful answer as far as ensuring beyond the shadow of a doubt that every person in the school district is being honest with you. But beyond curricula and books, who are the individuals, and what do we know about these people coming into the classroom or on Zoom or whatever? What do we know about these organizations coming in, and what do we know? Yeah, it's serious. I think honestly, it's a huge safety issue. A lot of these organizations, what are they connected to, and how do they promote their own organization through the school system, and then have their own youth organizing programs? I mean, the ways in which schools are being used without good intentions is vast, and it's something we all should be aware of and fight to change.
And I'm venture to say that they are concerned, especially if that someone is a person of color. I'm Hispanic. That doesn't exempt me from getting a background check just because the color of my skin or, my ethnic background. Whether or not however you want to identify, that doesn't matter. They need to double check that this is a person who can enter a school. And we're seeing a lot of abuse and a lot of like this big rash of teachers that are like having relationships with kids and abusing kids. And I think it's because they're just demanding less accountability for some reason. Like it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense that why would you be more careful about the parents that enter the school than the staff members that are in the school, even the janitors. You're hearing stuff in Wisconsin. We've had janitors, coaches, my friend from Deerfield, Illinois, who's going through hell and back, another staff member that is accused of having an inappropriate relationship with kids. It's every day there's a new headline, and yet parents are the bad guys. Parents are the enemy, and the teachers unions will go out of their way to protect these abusers. No matter what, if they're teachers, then they're part of the staff. Then we're going to fight for them, and not parents. I know it's getting to be 9:03. It's hard to close. We've got a lot of people watching, which is great. But I actually would like to eat dinner.
Same.
And my husband like to see me. But I did want to, there's a few things I wanted to share. Let's see. There was, I mentioned that Lila Rose had and Live Action has done a great job. The Susan B. Anthony Society, a lot of conservative organizations are coming together, and we in Moms for Liberty, we are asking for the defunding of Planned Parenthood because of the curriculum, because our mission involves K-12 education and strengthening parental rights and empowering, informing, and engaging parents at all levels of government. And Planned Parenthood has very often tried to stand right in between parents and their children. And the curriculum that they are responsible for in our schools is, like we've discussed, is terrible. And so just wanted to point out that there is this huge effort to defund Planned Parenthood, and it's had a really big boost because what we talked about, that Planned Parenthood is now getting involved in providing virtual appointments with teenagers. And if you go to the Planned Parenthood website, they actually boast about the fact that they can provide virtual and in-person gender affirming care, even if a parent is not aware or willing to sign off on their minor receiving this care. They have an appeal to minors. They have websites. They have a place where they can fill out to get more information. And this information is provided in schools. Planned Parenthood works with Advocates for Youth. It works with Glenson, works with all of these LGBTQIA plus activist organizations. And they also all work together to radicalize youth. I had shared this morning headlines where Advocates for Youth, Planned Parenthood, and other organizations were doing get out the vote efforts, trying to get kids involved in politics, get them to DC, get them involved in activism. So you know better than me all of this about one last bit. Planned Parenthood, what like in just a few minutes, their ties to Advocates for Youth, how Planned Parenthood got involved in sex education, and just to confirm to everyone watching, Planned Parenthood is funded by the federal government. And I'll let you talk now.
Yeah, Advocates for Youth, which again started as the Center for Population Options back in 1980. Their chairperson had worked for the Guttmacher Institute prior to it even being called that. The Guttmacher Institute is the research arm of Planned Parenthood, and it's actually really interesting because if you look at the history, they were using the U.S. Census data to then analyze different populations and age ranges and regions in the United States to target those regions for family planning. But once abortion came along, they didn't really need family planning as much. But using the U.S. Census data, they were able to look at this and even determine how many staff they needed for a set clinic in an area that they anticipated or they witnessed population growth, and they were trying to curb that. So again, it has to do with marketing, messaging. Population control is absolutely a part of it. If you're not sure about that, you can go back to some of their historical documents that you can access, like the Jaffe memo that came out in 1969 that talked about ways to reduce the population. And they suggested all kinds of things. This was written by a man named Friedrich Jaffe, who also worked at the Guttmacher Institute, again, before it was called the Guttmacher Institute. But yeah.
1980 Advocates for Youth, I'm writing this down, was called what?
The Center for Population Options.
And they changed to Advocates for Youth.
Right.
It sounds better.
Yeah.
Did they decide that, hey, we need to get into schools and that's the best method?
I mean, SECUS was originally 1964. Dr. Mary Calderon, she too came out of Planned Parenthood. So you've got, these two organizations that really had a foundation with staff that had worked for Planned Parenthood. And then from those organizations, other organizations developed as well. So like we talked about, Advocates.
And FOSC, what's that? The Future of Sex Education.
Sex Education, yeah. FOSA is Planned Parenthood Federation of America. It's Advocates for Youth. It's Answer, which their tagline is Sex Ed Honestly, and SECUS as well. And so they put out a lot of information.
Why are there so many different groups?
Well, it's really interesting. So I think sometimes
it's confusing for parents, right? Because there's until you know that they all work together.
Yeah. Well, and it certainly gives an appearance of them being so big and so many groups and all these things. And when, let's say, for example, let's say in a given state like California, there's going to be a bill introduced. if you have an account with the state of California, you can type in your organization's name and you could oppose or support a legislative bill. And it could even be officially in the documentation that's then printed out and shown in those committee meetings as the bill is going through those different meetings. If you have a lot of different organizations, you could name every single one of those organizations. And now, wow, that looks so substantial. You look at how many organizations are supporting this bill. But to me, what was really interesting, I know in the past, there was this organization right after the Loudoun County parent movement started growing and getting big and gaining a lot of news media attention. There was a group really starting to be seen called Red, Wine, and Blue. And
I know Red, Wine, and Blue. I attend, actually, I have on my calendar, I attend their, I get all their emails.
So, I mean, we're supposed to believe that this is a completely organic group.
Yep, that's how
that just happened.
We're just regular moms.
They're just regular moms.
Regular moms.
It just happened to have already often, many of them been Planned Parenthood activists already. And we have not seen the numbers out of that organization for it being this amazing, organic, supposedly group. But to me, the fact that, I mean, that group has made, like, we don't see it. If I were to go out in my community and ask people about it, even in California, in a very blue part of California, people do not know what this organization is. And the reality is people do know what Moms for Liberty is. And the reason why is because Moms for Liberty is organic. There's the parental rights movement is very organic, and people are rightly responding to what they're witnessing in their children's school. It's not just the concerns of what curricula is being taught. Parental rights are caring about kids actually succeeding. I mean, I remember thinking to myself as we started watching states or cities across the country, some of them start to adopt these DEI groups, and these people get around and discuss what they're upset about. But you do not see these DEI groups that spend all of this time to form these committees with cities, et cetera. They're not doing tutoring for kids. They're not going and doing trash cleanups. Mm-hmm. They're not doing things they're not helping tutor kids in math. They're not helping enhance children's reading and phonics. So as much as they chatter about all these things that they're concerned about, the old adage, you see it by the evidence of what goes on. What have they advanced? Nothing.
And you can see here, so here's Red, White, and Blue. Now, Wisconsin used to be one of their target states, and that was during the 2024 election. So that's what now you can see these are the 5 states that they are going to be focusing on 2026, I think. Actually, there's some. This year, Virginia, there's an election. So I think school board elections in these areas, there's a gubernatorial election in Ohio, gubernatorial election in Virginia. So they only have a presence where they're political hotspots, whereas Moms for Liberty has chapters 48 states, and we're always trying to grow chapters. Doesn't matter where they are. Of course, there was a little bit more of a focus on some battleground states during 2024, but we are always focused on all the things. Okay. Mm-hmm. They are hyper-focused only on what's politically expedient. And I find it interesting that you say that a lot of these women worked for Planned Parenthood. I totally believe it. The last Red, White, and Blue lecture I sat through, it was a Black male activist / teacher, and at first, when the first couple minutes, like maybe the first 5 to 10 minutes, the things that he said, I thought, wow, like okay, he's saying some interesting things. Maybe after the election, they're doing something different and they're trying to moderate. Well, didn't take long, and he just went straight off to the race. It pretty much like, if you anyone who voted for MAGA is the N-word, they're all fascists. And then when I say that, I mean, like, they like to say Nazis, and I hate saying that word. I hate saying that word because it's been used to me, calling me a Nazi, calling my friends, and it's so ridiculous. It offends me to my core that when that is said.
I remember when the protesters were in mass at the Philadelphia summit. And we were just trying to get on the bus to go to the first night's event. And I was there with two of my friends who are Jewish, and they were called Nazis, which is horrific. That is what these people were doing. And then I remember hearing from people saying, oh, when we were flying in, we heard a couple of these activists talking about how they were being flown in. And that's the thing. A lot of these things people see, they see all these protests happening, and they see groups that just pop up that are supposed to be organic. A lot of this is not. It's not organic. It's funded. It's no different to me. Sometimes, you see those people that are paid to do a protest outside of a shopping mall, or they're paid to hold a sign for real estate. I mean, these people are being paid to protest, and they're being bussed in.
When I was at the Elon Musk rally in Wisconsin, and it was in Green Bay, we were waiting to go in, and it's freezing cold. Buses come by, and all the protesters come out. And then they were rotating so that they could warm up. They'd go into the bus and warm up and come out. And they were from everywhere. This was not organic. They were being bussed in. They were working for ACLU. They were working for teachers unions. They were working for activist organizations. They were all getting paid. It was complete AstroTurf. And I think that even the things we saw, keying of the Teslas, all of that was orchestrated. All of that was planned, that was premeditated to make it seem organic, to make it seem like people are just walking down the street and just keying cars. I promise you, like that was all planned by activists to make Americans think that everyone hates Elon Musk. And then they're very good at the propaganda. They're so good at it. And that's why we are immune to it. Moms for Liberty, we're immune to all of it. It doesn't faze us at all. And that's why we're trying to get more people like us to just be immune to it. When they call you names, just ignore it. When they do these theatrical things, don't let it faze you. When President Trump said with the tariffs, don't sell your stock right now. This is all the hysteric, all of this stuff. It's all going to be fine. Just sit tight, and we were buying during that time, not selling. And because we were prepared. We know the antics of the radical left. We know what they do. And you've got to become immune to that stuff. But the red, wine, and blue, to tie it up, the guy at the end basically implied that our kids need to basically go into re-education camps. And the parents, he had like no hope for the parents, that maybe, but he said, the lesson from 2024 was, we haven't been radical enough. We haven't been harsh enough. We haven't been pushing CRT and gender ideology hard enough in classrooms. And they're all cheering, yay, yay, yay. And I knew from that point, because I think I attended this, it was around Christmas when they had this. And I thought, you know what? Rest over Christmas, because they're not going anywhere. They are accelerating. They're going to persist.
It's interesting how I've talked with some of these people who they really do believe they're not radical enough, or that they should have reacted with anger and yelling and profanities at somebody who believes something differently than them. And when you actually get them one-on-one and you say, do you realize what you just did to that person? They're like, what do you mean? I'll never forget this conversation where I explained to the person, I said, very similar. I want you to imagine that you have two restaurants in your community that you can go eat at. One, the service is friendly, it's fast, it's professional, the servers are knowledgeable, and the food tastes delicious. And you can count on that restaurant to be just a great place to go. Or there's another restaurant in town that's going to act like you're an inconvenience to them. They're going to forget your order. They're going to be rude to you. What restaurant are you going to eat at? You're going to eat at the restaurant that actually listens to you, that's nice to you, that's things like that. And that is exactly what happened for my kids when they watched some of the ways in which their school staff acted, and the way that my kids and some of their friends have watched some of these intense activists shout at people, use profanity, flip them off, all these things. They're flipping off complete strangers. What that does for that teen or that child is that says, I want nothing to do with that. In the same way you would look at that restaurant and say, I'm not eating there anymore. The service is bad. The food doesn't taste good. I'm going somewhere else. And so these political, scream at you, all of that, they're actually, for many people watching and witnessing it, they're solidifying the fact that every time that young person, when they're old enough to vote, goes into a voting booth, they will remember who and what that person stood for, and they will never vote that way in their life.
This is kind of funny. I just looked up their events. I left MAGA. Here's what you need to know. I promise you, whoever is a former MAGA supporter, it's all lies. It's not true. Somebody who left MAGA now, they're going to tell you about how to interrupt their Trumpism. The emotional grip of Trumpism. Oh my gosh. And like this is troublemakers. That's what they call themselves based on the book and the activist toolkit, Beautiful Trouble. And that's a whole nother discussion. James has talked about that, but it's very interesting. I actually read their stuff, and some of the tactics are useful. Like, not they have some really radical tactics, but there are some things that they do that are useful, like getting ahead of the messaging and all that stuff. But this group, look at everything they do. Is there anything there about children? All their events are political. There's nothing there. These are supposed to be moms. They're trying. This is the counter group to Moms for Liberty. First of all, red wine. Okay.
Yeah, it's a disregard. It's a disregard for people, and it's this pride and esteem in their own ideas. There's a lack of. I remember back when I was first researching, I didn't want to jump to any conclusions. I wanted to read all kinds of things first before I formulated a conclusion. And then I'll never forget having ideas about different topics. And sometimes people approached me and said, I want you to consider this, or have you read this? And I wouldn't shout at them. I'd welcome it and say, let's have a conversation. Yeah. I might change my mind on something, and I really appreciate that you're willing to have this discussion with me. And I will say, years ago, I think it was years ago now, or maybe it's just been over a year, but I remember being on the Culture War with Tim Pool. and it was a debate. And
Who are you debating?
when afterwards,
Who-
I was
who-
even
who are you
before and
debating? I
after.
forgot. Who are you debating on that?
I'm trying to remember their name at the moment. We didn't keep
Was
in
it a guy?
touch,
It
but
was a guy, right?
yeah, but I respected the fact that even though there was a lot we disagreed on, when we didn't get into everything that I would have liked to get into on that, we were limited, of course, and it's, live and whatnot. But I will say I appreciate Desmond Farini.
Mhm.
I appreciated that Desmond was willing to have the discussion, because I'll never forget reaching out to a teacher that had a difference of opinion and asking if I could take all of those teachers that were pretty angry with me about my stance and what I said when I addressed CSE and whatnot. I asked if I could take them out. They could choose their favorite coffee shop or breakfast spot, and I was going to pay for all of their favorite breakfast items and drinks, etc., if it meant an opportunity for me to just listen to them, and then in turn, me to share with them as well. And I even said to the teacher, I said, you promote social emotional learning. You say it's conflict resolution. Shouldn't we be modeling these kinds of discussions for kids and know that when we have a difference of agreement, we can come and have a discussion respectfully and walk away, potentially friends, but we don't have to share the same opinions on everything. I mean, but they weren't willing to go. And that to this day makes me sad, because I would have much rather had an opportunity to have an understanding of where they're coming from, and vice versa, and just meet over coffee. I mean, I really like coffee. So, I mean, and I know they do too. And I thought, let's just have a coffee. Let's have, you pick the spot, you pick my treat. But yeah, they wouldn't. And to me, that's really sad.
Yeah,
So
it's great. It's great to, I am always open to conversations too. Right now, just on a side note, which is cool. I don't know because we're so late, but we are right now the #1 live show on X. We have the most. It could be because it's getting kind of late, but I'll take it.
late.
I'll take it.
I mean, it's later for you than me.
I'll take it. It's good news. Like we've got right. We've had 8,000 people watching, so that's great. For impromptu, two moms talking. When we're done talking, we're gonna go put our kids to bed. What time is it for you? Do you still have to eat dinner with your kids, or what are they doing?
California time. I do have to do dinner and get that all squared away shortly here. But this has been nice. I mean, I think
that this is like, we're going to go make dinner for now. My kids better have eaten dinner. They may not have, because my husband's been in charge. So they may have. I think he made pizza. I think he made some pizzas, and I have leftovers from yesterday. So
nice. I will say, I found on Pinterest this recipe, and I made it last night for dinner, and our whole family
what was
loved
it?
Okay, so it's a salad.
When we were talking, you were making a salad.
Yes, I was. So it's super easy. If you're listening and you've been hearing us yak about all kinds of stuff, but you want a good recipe. Wasn't it something we were called in Philadelphia? Something about
the American Girls?
No, well, yes, we were called that, but there was also something about cooking. But anyways,
get back in the kitchen. They always say that to me. Why are you talking get back in the kitchen? It's like, oh God.
I got some rinsed organic romaine lettuce, chopped it up, put it, made salad bowls on the top, did some organic corn, diced tomatoes, some sliced avocado, some drained black beans, and then some cilantro sprinkled on top. And then super easy to make the dressing. I use some organic Greek yogurt in the blender with 2 minced cloves of garlic, and then a little bit of this. You can buy it canned, I guess. Somebody's going to probably have advice for some better way to make this, but it was quick and it was easy. Adobo, chili, and like a sauce. And then I did some lime juice splashed in, blended it up, and then, oh my, and then we did like, I put sauteed chicken on top, chopped up.
Oh, that's
and it was a very good salad. I'm just saying.
Ravioli, and then I made red sauce and cream sauce because different kids want different things. And then we just made a regular salad with chicken and sauteed some vegetables, and it was nice because then we had 2 different kinds of pasta. The kids always like that, and my husband will say, I love the cream sauce, but he's training for a marathon, so he's like, I can't eat that. I'll eat the red sauce. So it was fun, a little bit of everything. And so there's still some of those leftovers. I have graduations to do tomorrow, so I'm happy to do this tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to have the #1 show on X right now.
And for anybody tuning in, if you want to follow me on Twitter, my @ is
let me take that in for you too. I'm gonna
KELLYSKE, and
I'm gonna type this in so they know. You can talk.
I was a little bit not as active on Twitter recently because it was very sad. We lost our dog. She had been on heart meds for a long time, and her body stopped responding to the heart meds. So that was hard. I think pets are such a special part of our lives, and I love animals. It's funny because I just, some people will say that if you're conservative, you don't care about pets or certain things. I'm like, no, I really, they try and paint us as book banners, but I love books. I've collected them since I was little. And not only that, like when I was a little girl and I watched Beauty and the Beast, I am that classic, like the moment the Beast gives her the library, I was like, oh, he gave her a library.
I have got, I have so many books. I collect books. My grandmother was an avid reader, raised me to read. I love reading. And when it comes to, I have one daughter in public high school, and I have a good relationship with her teachers. And there's some books that because she's taking honors English, and some challenging books with some like Kite Runner. And I didn't say, no, she can't read it. No, she read it. And I made sure, the school made me aware that she was reading it when the difficult parts, and her and I went for walks and we discussed it. Of my kids, 3 of my 5 have read that book. There's a couple other books that are hard about, war, different topics that are difficult, and what happens in war. 2 of them cannot read those books. They just don't. 2 of my daughters, they're too sensitive. They can't read it. But other 3 did read it. They were able to read it. It's all we're asking is that we know our kids and we know what they can tolerate. Now, there might be some families that say, absolutely not. I don't want my child to read The Kite Runner. Perfectly fine. That is their right. And they should be able to opt their kid out of that. And there should be an alternative book. And this process should be done discreetly so that this kid isn't teased and made to feel uncomfortable,
Right.
And there's a way to do that. We do that at our school. Now, it was a contentious battle to get there, but there was a misunderstanding. The school staff thought that those of us parents that didn't like some of the content of books that were required in high school, where there were scenes of rape and abuse, and it wasn't my child, it wasn't even my class, but I helped support a family who really felt passionate that they didn't want their daughter to read that book. And they went through a really horrible situation just because they were Christians and they didn't want their daughter to read a book. They weren't asking for it to be banned. They just said, could we opt out? And that situation ended up, the courage of that family ended up changing the policy at our school. And now we have a much better path and a way to deal with this stuff. And
Right.
like you said, it's dispelling. These teachers weren't trying to groom the kids, and nor were we as parents trying to ban the books. Okay. Both of
Right.
those things weren't true. It was
Right.
just that there were just a difference in opinions. And when everyone could come together and talk and understand each other, then we could put the kids first. And you would hope
Yeah.
that that would be the situation everywhere. And I also would like to say a lot of the books that, like Barnes and Noble, they just had this display, banned books. I'm looking, all the books, I was like, that's the left did that. We're not trying to ban To Kill a Mockingbird. We haven't tried to ban Gone with the Wind, 1984, Brave New World, and all of these books, Dr. Seuss. I'm like, you all banned those. You're the ones that have said we can't have these books. Not us. The only, where are the books that we haven't banned that we don't like? Where's Genderqueer? Where's Fun Home? Where's Push? Where are these books with these graphic, violent like scenes that we just don't want our middle schoolers to read? I mean, seriously, like it's that's why I don't like to talk about the books, especially at a high school level, because I'm like, I've never challenged a book at a high school level. I have a really high standard. Even in Moms for Liberty in Wisconsin, there's some parents that have wanted to, hey, I want to go after because of this book. And I'm like, no, that's,
Right.
that's,
Well, I mean,
not
I
it.
remember there were multiple books I remember reading from middle school to high school that, I mean, there are so many books that taught me, I mean, whether it was historical fiction, I mean, that's a particular book genre that I enjoy, but there's so many books that teach you so much about people. And I would say more than social emotional learning, because I'm not an advocate for SEL, is that having relationships with people and learning conflict resolution by pursuing peace with people, and even people who share different perspectives and opinions of you or than you, and reading literature can help create empathy and understanding and appreciation. That one of the things that's often overlooked when you get like an activist reacting to you at a school board meeting, or protesters outside of a building, or whatever it may be, they're not looking at you as a human being, and they're not seeking to even understand where you're coming from, because so many people have different experiences in their lives, and they may be lumping you into some past experience that they had, or they may be deciding something about you that's not true, but they're not even trying to have that conversation to work those things out and see where you're coming from. I mean, even the media does this, which is why I think they've got the nickname oftentimes the fake news media, because you'll see that they employ these tactics. Like, for example, they'll seek to have an interview with somebody, and this is a tactic I was told happens now, where they will email you seeking to have an interview, but they only give you so many hours before the time they email you and the time they interview you, so that they can say in the story, we reached out for comment, but this person never responded. Or, other things that happen where a journalist is just looking to spin a story, not really actually get the story, not really get an understanding of both sides, which that's disappointing to me, because it takes away someone, their individuality. And then it removes an opportunity to really have a productive discussion, a productive conversation. And I find it sad that oftentimes the proponents of things like SEL or these other programs we discuss, you don't see good results in their lives. You don't see good evidence of it. I mean, it's like I was mentioning earlier with DEI. If these people were really for all these things, I mean, let's go out. Let's see them cleaning up the streets. Let's see them taking time in their spare time to volunteer and to help kids develop their reading skills, so on and so forth. But anyways, but
well, and I know you need to go because I actually got you've got to. And so it's a great way to end. Let's read more books that are good, like The Hobbit. Okay, because I'm just reading The Hobbit.
Don't get me started. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings and Hobbit fan.
Oh, I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. And actually, I have to say real quick, I know the Disney Plus series, the newest one is actually like really good. And I can't right now. I'm so tired. I can't even think of the name. But it's an offshoot of Star Wars, and it's actually good because it's not like, you know, woke I am woman hear me roar Star Wars where, you know, pretend like Princess Leia wasn't totally awesome and say like we've never had a strong female superpower role model like
right.
So anyway, but The Hobbit's Secret Garden, Heidi, Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, Anne of Green Gables, like I grew up like on these books, and Sweet Valley High. I did read that. I did like that.
Victoria Babysitters Club.
Yes, Babysitters Club, Victoria Holt, but that, you know, like I love to read. I have so many books like that I need to read right now that are all from our friends that write them. I buy them right away. And then I'm like, okay, I have to read these books. But all right. Well, Kelly, this has been great having the #1 live show on X. We'll have to do this again.
I would love to
get some more moms on, but this was great. I learned a lot, and I think a lot of other people did as well. And now I'm going to go eat, and you're going to feed your children, and we're going to be good moms. And not the red wine and blue fake, like,
you know, I mean, I don't know
I'm sure there's real moms. I'm not going to say that.
Maybe there's a future, you know, like Monica Klein, maybe there's a future that, you know, I hope the best, really, truly. I never, ever want ill will towards anyone. And, people need to value other people more often.
They talk a lot of crap about us, though. I have to say, like
they do.
Their whole all they ever do. It's like that other Moms for Liberty. I mean, they run the Stop Moms for Liberty face, which is just awful. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So awful. It's like, who has time? How do you have enough time? I don't have time to do the Stop Red Wine and Blue. Like especially now, I used to always, you know, it's part of the training to know what other people are saying, but I actually sit through, do they ever do that? And I know you have to, I sit through their lectures. I sit through hours and hours of DI training. I listen intensely, and I think maybe they'll say something that's, I don't think they do the same for us. They don't really listen to what we're saying. They make caricatures of us, and they actually project all the things that they do onto us when we just want to be left alone.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here now if they would have just left me alone.
No, if somebody told me back in 2016 summer and they said, Kelly, in 8.5 years, this is what you would be doing, I would have laughed. I would have laughed so hard and said, oh, you are nuts. You have no idea. I would never do that. Never.
I never would thought I'd be now. Never. If they
never say never, they say.
Children, not just me, if they would have left my kids alone and just let us be, we wouldn't be here now. And now we have to start beautiful trouble of our own. All right. Well, bye everyone. This has been fun. We'll do this again really soon. Have a good night, Kelly. I'll call you
good
tomorrow.
Night. Okay. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.